Chapter 1. The Boy Who Thought He Was Ordinary. Issei had a theory about himself. It was not a grand theory, nothing worthy of a chalkboard or a late-night debate. It was simply this: he was the most ordinary human being in the entire history of Ko Academy, possibly the entire city, possibly the entire country. He was not the smartest student. He was not the strongest. He was not the most handsome, though he privately thought he had decent hair on days when the humidity cooperated. He was, by every measurable standard, completely and utterly unremarkable. And yet, there was something that separated Issei from every other self-declared ordinary person he had ever encountered in his 16 years of life. Issei was perceptive in a way that embarrassed him sometimes, because it felt like cheating. He could read a math problem and see 3 solutions before the teacher finished writing it on the board. He could watch a fight between 2 upperclassmen and predict which one would swing first, and where, and why. He could listen to the way a person paused in the middle of a sentence and understand, without words, what they had almost said. He never told anyone this. It seemed rude somehow. Like bragging about something he had not earned. So he sat in the second row of his homeroom class on a crisp October morning, doodling a small dragon in the margin of his history notes, and he listened. He was always listening. Hayadu. Are you paying attention? Issei looked up from his dragon. His homeroom teacher, Roswisa Sensei, a silver-haired woman who had joined the faculty only 3 months ago and still looked mildly surprised every time a student called her name, was watching him with an expression that was equal parts suspicion and amusement. Every word, Issei said. Then what was the primary cause of the Warring States period in Japan? The collapse of central authority under the Ashikaga shogunate, combined with provincial lords accumulating independent military power. The process accelerated after the Unin War because the shogunate lost both the will and the resources to reassert control. Roswisa Sensei blinked. Then she made a small mark in her attendance book that Issei had learned, over weeks of careful observation, meant she had updated her internal assessment of a student. Correct, she said. Pay closer attention to the board. Yes, Sensei. His 2 best friends, Matsuda and Motohama, leaned toward him from either side with expressions of profound respect mixed with personal offense. You were drawing a dragon, Matsuda whispered. I can do 2 things at once. That is deeply unfair to the rest of us, Motohama said. Issei went back to his dragon. He gave it small horns and a pleased expression. Outside the window, the leaves on the old oak tree at the edge of the school grounds were turning red at the tips. The sky was very blue. Somewhere on the far side of the campus, near the old gymnasium that the student council had been trying to renovate for 2 years, a crow was making a sound that was not quite a caw. It was lower than that. More deliberate. Issei looked at the crow. The crow looked at Issei. Then it spread its wings and flew away, and Issei felt, in the back of his chest, the faintest echo of something he had no name for. Like a question he had not asked yet. The rumor reached him at lunch. Ko Academy was a school with a long memory. It had been a girls-only institution for most of its history before transitioning to co-ed 3 years ago, and the girls who had attended during those years talked about the transition the way one might talk about a natural disaster that had ultimately been fine but remained vivid. The boys who had joined since then, Issei and his friends among them, had learned quickly that they were guests in a house with established rules. Those rules were largely set by 2 groups. The first was the student council, which was run with quiet precision by a silver-haired girl named Sona Citri. Sona wore her glasses like a statement, and her schedule like a religion, and Issei had privately concluded that she was either a genius or something that looked so much like a genius that the difference was academic. The second was the Occult Research Club. The ORC occupied a converted clubroom in the old school building, the part of campus that smelled of cedar and old paper and something faintly electric that Issei had never been able to identify. It was presided over by Rias Gremery, a girl who looked like a painting come to life and carried herself like someone who had never once doubted that the world would arrange itself to her preferences. She was also, as of this morning, apparently very interested in Issei Hayadu. She asked about you, Matsuda said, setting his lunch tray down with the reverence of someone delivering sacred text. Gromora-senpai. She asked Aikachin who you were? Aika told her your name, your grade, your test scores, and the fact that you once correctly identified a rare bird species on a school trip to the nature preserve, Motohama added. I do not know why she included the bird. It was a Ural owl, Issei said. They are not usually seen this far south. Issei. Focus. Rias Gremory wanted to know who you are. Issei considered this while eating a piece of tamagoyaki. He had seen Rias Gremory before, of course. Everyone had seen Rias Gremory. She was not the kind of person you failed to notice. But he had also noticed, in the particular way he noticed things, that she was rarely interested in anyone who was not already in her orbit. The ORC had its own gravity. It did not reach outward. So why would it reach for him? I will probably find out eventually, he said. That is the least satisfying response to this information, Matsuda said. It is also true. The crow was back. Issei could see it from the cafeteria window, perched on the fence post at the edge of the courtyard. It tilted its head. Issei tilted his. The question he had not asked yet was getting louder. He met her at 4:15 in the afternoon. He had not planned to. He was cutting through the old building on his way to the library, taking the longer route because he liked the smell of it, when a door he had passed 100 times without incident opened and Rias Gremory stepped into the hallway. She was taller than he remembered from a distance. She had red hair the color of autumn maple leaves and blue-green eyes that reminded him of deep water. She was wearing the Ko Academy uniform and she was looking directly at him with an expression of calm, focused interest, as though she had been waiting for him specifically. Issei Hayadu, she said. It was not a question. Rias Gremory-senpai, he replied. Something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Most people, he suspected, were flustered by her. He was not flustered. He was curious, which was a different thing entirely. You are not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone who would be nervous. I am a little nervous, he said honestly. But mostly I am trying to figure out why you were asking about me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped back and gestured toward the open door. Walk with me, she said. There is something I would like to discuss with you. He followed her, because she had said it like someone who was used to being followed, and because the question in his chest had become very loud indeed. The occult research club room smelled of cedar and old books and that electric quality he had never identified. There were bookshelves that reached the ceiling. There was a chess set on a side table, mid-game, with pieces carved from what looked like actual stone. There was a couch where a girl with long silver hair was reading a book that, from the spine, appeared to be a graduate-level text on theoretical physics. Rias sat in the chair behind the large desk. She folded her hands. I am going to tell you something, she said, and I would like you to hear all of it before you decide what to think. All right. The world is larger than you have been taught. There are beings and powers that operate alongside human civilization without human knowledge. Devils. Angels. Fallen angels. Supernatural creatures of many kinds. This is not metaphor. This is fact. Issei looked at her. He looked at the chess set. He looked at the silver-haired girl, who had turned a page without looking up. I believe you, he said. Rias blinked. It was a very small blink, but he caught it. You believe me. You are not lying. Your posture is entirely consistent with someone stating what they consider to be obvious reality. Also, he paused, there is something about the energy in this room that is not quite normal. I noticed it the first time I walked past the door 2 months ago. I did not have a framework for it before now. The silver-haired girl lowered her book and looked at him with an expression of sudden, complete attention. Akino, Rias said quietly, to someone who had not been in the room 30 seconds ago. I saw, said a voice, and Issei turned to find a girl with long dark hair pulled into a high ponytail leaning against the bookshelf, arms crossed, with a smile that managed to be both warm and genuinely unsettling. He noticed the aura on his own. First time since Kiba. My name is Issei, Issei said, because introductions seemed important. We know, said the dark-haired girl. I am Akino Himejima. The anxious physicist is Kaneko Tuju. I am not anxious, said Kaneko, who had returned to her book. She is a little anxious, Akino told Issei. I can hear you. Rias held up a hand and everyone became quiet. She looked at Issei. You have a sacred gear, she said. It is extraordinarily rare, and it has been dormant because you have not been pushed to activate it. But it is there. I can feel it. And there are others who can feel it too, which means you are not as invisible as you have believed yourself to be. Issei thought about the crow. He thought about the question that had been building in his chest all day. What does it do? He asked. It amplifies, Rias said. Almost without limit. What it amplifies depends on you. Outside, the sun had dropped below the tree line. The cedar smell was stronger now. The chess game on the side table looked, from this angle, like someone had stopped it at exactly the right moment. All right, said Issei Hayadu, who had thought he was ordinary all his life. Tell me the rest of it. Chapter 2. Sacred Gear, Ordinary Name. The lesson lasted 3 hours. Issei sat on the old couch in the Occult Research Club room and listened to Rias Gremory explain the three-way deadlock between heaven, hell, and the fallen angels, the role of the rating games in modern devil politics, the mechanics of a peerage, and what it meant to serve a devil lord. He asked questions at even intervals, not because he was confused but because he was assembling a structure, and he wanted to make sure each piece was seated correctly before he added the next. Rias answered all of them. She seemed, he thought, a little surprised that the questions were always practical. Not are you really a devil, but how does territory inheritance work when a lord dies without a rated successor? You are processing this very quickly, she said at one point. I am interested, he said, which was the only explanation he had. Aquino brought tea at the halfway point. She set Issei's cup in front of him with the particular care of someone performing a small experiment. No lightning, Kaneko said, from behind her book. I was not going to, Aquino said. Your hand was crackling. It was appreciating the moment. Issei looked at his tea. It smelled like jasmine and something electric. He drank it. The actual problem, Rias explained as the hour grew late, was this: 3 weeks ago, a fallen angel named Rainier had taken an interest in the energy signature of Issei's sacred gear. Fallen angels collected sacred gears when they could, for research and for power. Rainier had already established a presence near Ko under a false human identity, and was almost certainly preparing to make a move. She is patient, Aquino said. Patient and precise. She will wait until she knows exactly what she has before she acts. How long do I have? Issei asked. Days, perhaps. Possibly as few as 2 or 3. Issei thought about this with the same focused stillness he brought to math problems. He did not panic. Panic, in his experience, was what happened when you stopped thinking and started feeling, and he was not done thinking yet. What would you need from me, he said, to make this safer for both of us? Rias tilted her head. Both of us? A fallen angel targeting someone near your territory is a problem for you too. I am not asking you to protect me out of charity. I am asking what a mutually useful arrangement looks like. The room was quiet for a moment. Kaneko very slowly closed her book. He is 16, Aquino said, not to anyone in particular. I am aware, Rias said. She looked at Issei with an expression that he classified, after a moment, as genuine respect. It was different from the polite interest she had worn when they first met. This was the expression of someone revising an estimate upward. What I would need is simple. Allow me to observe you for 48 hours. Remain on school grounds as much as possible. Do not approach anyone you do not know, and if someone approaches you claiming to be new in the area, come to me before you engage further. That is less complicated than I expected. The complicated part comes after, she said. If Rainier moves before we are ready, I may need your trust very quickly and without room for explanation. I can do that, he said without hesitation. Another small flicker in her eyes. Another revision. Good, Rias said. She stood and extended her hand. It was a formal gesture, he realized, the kind that carried weight in whatever world she had just introduced him to. He stood and shook it. Her grip was firm and her skin was warm, and there was something about the touch that sent a low hum through the palm of his hand all the way up his arm. Not unpleasant. The opposite, actually. He noted it and filed it under things to think about later. He was halfway home, the October night cold and bright with stars, when he felt it. The feeling was hard to describe. It was like standing in a room and suddenly becoming certain that someone was standing behind you, but when you turned, the room was empty. Except the certainty did not go away. Issei stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the sidewalk under a streetlight and looked carefully at the street. A girl was leaning against the gate of the small shrine 3 doors down from the school. She was wearing a school uniform, but not Koa's. She had short dark hair and dark eyes, and she was watching him with an expression of carefully constructed friendliness that had, under it, like something glimpsed through ice, no warmth at all. Issei had a gift for reading faces. "Hi," she said, and started walking toward him with the easy confidence of someone who expected to be welcomed. He took out his phone and typed one message to the contact Rias had given him before he left. Familiar face. Front gate shrine. The reply came in 4 seconds. Do not engage. We are coming. You are from Ko, right? The girl said, drawing closer. She had a nice smile. It did not reach her eyes by 3 full centimeters. I just transferred to the school on the north side. I keep getting lost. Do you know the area? Not very well, Issei said pleasantly. I am sorry, I am terrible with directions. You might want to try one of the map apps. Something shifted in her expression, very briefly. She had expected different. She had expected him to offer to help, to walk with her, to be charmed and available. Oh, she said. Of course. Thank you anyway. She turned and walked away, and the watching feeling went with her, and Issei stood under the streetlight and breathed carefully and waited. Rias appeared from the shadow of the old wall 30 seconds later. Aquino was 2 steps behind her. That was her, Rias said quietly. I know. How did you know? Her smile was performing its function from memory rather than feeling. It was technically correct in every way, which meant it was wrong. He paused. Also her shoes were wrong for the weather. Rias looked at him for a long moment. Aquino, she said. Already noted, Aquino said. She was smiling her own particular smile, the one that meant she found something delightful in an unsettling way. He is going to be very interesting. Go home, Rias told Issei. Straight home. I will have Kaneko watch the street tonight. You do not have to, he said. I want to, she said, and it came out with a directness that surprised her, he could tell, just slightly. He went home. He lay on his ceiling and looked at the dark and thought about sacred gears and fallen angels and the way a handshake could hum all the way up your arm. The dragon he had drawn in his history notes that morning was still in his bag. He took it out and looked at it for a while before he fell asleep. Chapter 3. The First Scale. The girl arrived on a Thursday. That was how Issei always thought of it afterward, not the day Rainier attacked, not the day everything changed, but the day the girl arrived. Because she arrived before any of that, at 7:45 in the morning, when Issei was sitting on the bench outside the school's front gate drinking tea from a thermos and reviewing his chemistry notes. He heard her before he saw her. The sound was distinctive, a heavy, precise footstep, the kind that came from someone accustomed to covering ground efficiently. Then a shadow fell across his notes, and he looked up. She was tall. That was the first thing. Not unusually tall, but tall enough that she stood at a slight angle when people were shorter than her. Weight shifted, unconsciously making herself smaller. She had dark green hair that fell to her shoulders in a straight, undramatic line, and dark amber eyes with vertical pupils that she was not, he noticed, attempting to hide. She was also covered, from the collarbone down, in fine scales the color of deep forest, darkest green at the shoulders, lightening toward the wrists, iridescent where they caught the morning light. She was wearing what appeared to be a modified Ko Academy uniform, the jacket tailored with extra width in the back and around the arms. She looked at him. He looked at her. Is this seat taken? She asked. Her voice was low and careful, as though she had learned to calibrate it. No, Issei said. She sat. She unfolded what looked like a handwritten map and studied it for a moment with the focused concentration of someone who found maps personally insulting but was trying to make peace with them. Administration building? She said. Left at the fountain, straight to the end of the path. Blue door. She looked at him. He had answered before she finished the sentence. Thank you, she said. She refolded the map with more force than necessary. New student? Transfer. From the Western Campus. A pause. I am aware that I do not look like a standard transfer student, You look like someone who had a difficult morning and is hoping the administration paperwork goes smoothly, he said. The scales are also notable, but that seemed less urgent to mention. She was quiet for 3 full seconds. You are not disturbed by them, she said. It was not a question. It was an observation, delivered with the tone of someone recalibrating. I learned 2 days ago that devils are real and there is a fallen angel who wants to take my sacred gear. The scales are interesting, but they are not in the top 5 most surprising things I have encountered this week. Another silence, longer this time. My name is Vritra, she said. Tosca Vritra. The scales are a side effect of the dragon bloodline I carry. They are not contagious and they do not affect my academic performance. Issei Hayadu, he said. Welcome to Ko. She stood, reshouldering her bag, and looked down at him with an expression he classified after a moment as cautious appreciation. Left at the fountain, she repeated. Left at the fountain. She walked away. Issei went back to his chemistry notes. He underlined 3 things and drew a small scale in the margin, just because it seemed like the right thing to do. He found out later, from Rias, that Tosca Vritra was a war dragon hybrid whose family had been in hiding for 60 years after a conflict with a fallen angel faction that bore an unfortunate number of similarities to the current situation. She had transferred to Ko on the explicit recommendation of Rias's peerage network, which had identified her as a potential ally. The recommendation had noted, with rare emphasis, that she did not trust anyone. She sat with you for 7 minutes this morning, Rias said. She was standing at the window of the ORC room. The afternoon light made her hair look like copper. I gave her directions, Issei said. Kaneko watched. You did not stare. You did not ask questions that were not already answered. You told her she looked stressed rather than unusual. Both were true, Issei. Rias turned from the window. She has not spoken voluntarily to a human student in the 3 schools she has attended before this one. The reports all say the same thing. She arrives, she endures, she leaves. She seems lonely, Issei said. Rias looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said. She is. Then I will be her friend, if she wants one. He said it the way he said most things, plainly, without decoration, with the total confidence of someone who had decided something and saw no reason to hedge it. The silence in the room that followed was the kind where multiple people were thinking very quickly and choosing not to say the thing they were thinking. The immediate concern, Aquino said from the corner, where she had been pretending to sort books, is Rainier. She made contact with you last night. She will move soon. We think tomorrow night. I know, Issei said. I have been thinking about it. Have you, Rias said? She is waiting for an isolated moment. She will try to create one that looks accidental. She will not come at me in a group because she does not know yet what my gear does. She wants to observe it activating before she tries to take it. He paused. Which means if I give her an isolated moment that is actually not isolated, she will walk into it. The sorting sounds from Aquino's corner stopped entirely. You want to set a trap, Rias said slowly. I want to give her what she is looking for and have it not be what she expects. You have people who can be in position in under 2 minutes. If I know where I am going to be and you know where you are going to be, the math is simple. Rias was quiet. Then she sat down and looked at him and said, with the tone of someone arriving at a conclusion they had not expected, all right. Walk me through it. That evening, after the planning was done and the positions were set and everyone had agreed on signals, Issei walked home alone by a slightly different route than usual. He passed the small shrine where Rainier had approached him. The gate was dark. He kept walking. At the corner near the park, someone fell into step beside him. He glanced sideways. Tosca Vritra was walking with her hands in the pockets of a jacket that was, he noted, the same modified cut as her school uniform. She was not looking at him. You live in this direction? He asked. Temporary housing. 3 blocks north. They walked in silence for most of a block. It was a comfortable silence, not an awkward one. Issei had learned to tell the difference. You know what I am, she said eventually. Dragon bloodline. You mentioned. And the rest of it. Bremery's network. The situation here. Yes. She was quiet again. Then, why do you treat it like it is normal? He considered the question properly. Because it is normal. Or rather, he amended, it is real, and real things should be treated as real. Treating something unusual as more than it is does not help either party. Her jaw shifted in something that might have been the beginning of a smile. You are strange. I have been told. I meant it as a compliment. They reached her block. She stopped. In the light of the street lamp her scales caught the orange glow and turned it to gold. The thing tomorrow, she said. With Gremery's plan. What about it? If something goes wrong. I would like to be in a position to help. Issei looked at her. She was looking at the middle distance, at some point slightly past his shoulder, with the studied nonchalance of someone who had offered something they were not sure would be accepted. That would be useful, he said carefully. I will mention it to Rias. You do not have to explain it to her as me doing something for you. I know. Something in her shoulders relaxed, almost invisibly. She gave him the smallest nod he had ever received, which somehow still felt formal and complete, and walked away into the dark. Issei stood at the corner for a moment, looking after her. He thought about lonely people and the specific way they offered things sideways, as though the offer would hurt less if it was rejected indirectly. He thought about the question still building in his chest, which was louder now than ever, and had begun to feel less like a question and more like an answer he had not yet read. Chapter 4. Crimson and Gold. Friday came clear and cold. Issei spent the school day being precisely as normal as possible. He answered questions in class. He ate lunch with Matsuda and Motohama. He nodded at acquaintances in the hallway. He sat beside Tosca in chemistry because they had been assigned adjacent lab benches 3 days ago, and she passed him the titration equipment without being asked because she had already concluded, empirically, that his pipette technique was more precise than hers. Your hands are still, she explained, when he looked surprised. Your calculations are faster, he replied. We are therefore a functional team. We are, he agreed. This seemed to satisfy something in her. She recorded the results in her neatest handwriting. At 3:45, Rias found him in the library. She sat across from him and set a small folded piece of paper on the table between them, which he unfolded and read in approximately 2 seconds. Tonight, he said low, the park on Mizuki Street. She has been watching it for 3 days. There is a broken light on the northwest path that makes it a natural choice for a quiet conversation. And the positions? Aquino at the north end. Kaneko at the south. I will be in the tree line on the east side, within 30 seconds of you. She paused. Your dragon friend asked to be placed on the roof of the community center on the west side. I agreed. She has range. Good. Rias was quiet for a moment. She was looking at him with an expression he had seen once before, when she had revised her estimate of him upward. I want to say something, she said. All right. I have been in many difficult situations. I have worked with people who were skilled and people who were brave and people who were both. And all of them, when they understood the scope of what they were facing, were afraid. It is normal to be afraid. She looked at him steadily. You are not afraid. I am, he said. I am afraid of making a mistake that gets someone hurt. That fear is useful because it makes me check my thinking. But I am not afraid of the situation itself. Why not? He thought about it. Because I understand it now. And I do not find understood things frightening. I find them interesting. She looked at him for a long, still moment. Then she did something he did not expect. She reached across the table and very briefly placed her hand over his. Be careful tonight, she said. You too, he said. She withdrew her hand and stood and left with the quiet efficiency she brought to everything. Issei looked at the table for a moment. His palm was humming again. The park was cold at night. Issei walked the northwest path at 8:15, hands in his jacket pockets, moving at the unhurried pace of someone who used this route regularly. The broken light on the northwest path was indeed broken. It cast a pocket of shadow between two functional lights, a natural blind spot. Rainier appeared from the shadow before he reached it. She was not wearing her school uniform this time. She was wearing something dark and practical, and her eyes were different now, a deep purple-black that caught the distant light strangely. She still had the correct smile, the one from memory. It looked less convincing than it had 2 nights ago. Issei Hayadu, she said. We should talk. We should, he agreed. He stopped at a natural distance, not too far and not close enough for her to grab. What would you like to talk about? Your sacred gear. I know you have one. You know I know. She spread her hands, a gesture of openness that was entirely performed. I am not your enemy. I just want to understand what you carry. That seems reasonable, he said. What is it worth to you? She paused. He had not been supposed to say that. Excuse me? Understanding my sacred gear. What is it worth to you? It is a straightforward question. He looked at her with his clear, direct gaze. Because you have been following me for a week. You have established a cover identity. You have been patient and careful. That kind of effort suggests that whatever I carry is worth significant resources to your faction. So I am asking, what is it worth? Something happened in Rainer's expression. The performance cracked. Underneath it was something cold and calculating and, he noticed, uncertain. She was uncertain because this was not the script. You should not be asking that kind of question, she said, and her voice had shifted into something harder. I know, he said. Which is why I asked it. Then two things happened at once. The first was that Rainer's wings appeared, dark feathers spreading in an instant, light gathering at her hands in the particular way he had read about but never seen. The second was that the night lit up. Yellow-white electricity came from the north, crackling through the air in a precise arc that did not touch Issei and absolutely did touch the light construct in Rainer's hands, dispersing it with a crack that sent birds scattering from the trees for 300 meters in every direction. From the south, a small, quiet figure moved with extraordinary speed, and from the east, red light filled the tree line. And from above, from the roof of the community center on the west side, a shape descended on broad dark wings, landed between Issei and Rainer, and stood. Tosca Vritra was 6 feet tall in the air, and she landed like she had been dropped from a great height, and was fine with that. Her wings were dark green edged with gold. Her eyes were lit from within with amber fire. The scales that covered her arms were raised and brilliant in the electric light. Walk away, she said to Rainer. Her voice, at its full volume, was the sound of something very large being held very still. Rainer looked at Tosca. She looked at Rias, who had stepped from the tree line. She looked at Aquino, whose hands were still sparking, and Kaneko, who was standing 15 feet away with the perfectly blank expression of someone who could move a car if they wanted to. Then she looked at Issei. For one moment, the calculation in her eyes was entirely visible. And the calculation said, not today. She vanished. The dark feathers scattered and dissolved. The park was quiet. Issei let out a slow breath. You arrived at a good moment, he said to Tosca, who was folding her wings back in a motion that looked practiced but still slightly stiff, like something she did not usually do in company. I was already in position. I know. It was still a good moment. She looked at him sideways. That near smile again. Rias arrived and stood beside Issei and looked at Tosca. Some kind of wordless assessment passed between them, the kind that took less than a second and covered a great deal of ground. Thank you, Rias said to Tosca. Formally, the way she had offered Issei her hand. Tosca lifted her chin in the small nod that, Issei was beginning to understand, was her version of a full embrace. They walked back to the school together, all 5 of them, because the ORC room was warm and Aquino wanted to make tea and Kaneko said, without any particular emphasis, that there were snacks. Issei walked in the middle of the group, listening to everyone around him, feeling the cold night air on his face. The question in his chest had finally resolved into something he could name. It was not a question, after all. It was the feeling of a life beginning to be large. Chapter 5. What the boost actually boosts. The sacred gear announced itself on a Saturday morning in the school courtyard. Issei had been informed, in the briefing after the Rainer encounter, that his gear was called the boosted gear. Rias had explained its documented history with the careful thoroughness of someone who had read everything available on the subject and was now reciting it in order. The previous wielders, the theoretical ceiling, the fact that the gear contained, dormant and ancient, the soul of a Welsh dragon named Drake. He had absorbed all of this with his usual attentiveness, and then asked one question. When it says it amplifies almost without limit, is there a known mechanism, or is the amplification simply a property of the gear itself? The second, Rias had said. Why? Because if it is a property of the gear, the ceiling is determined by what it amplifies. If it amplifies different things equally, then what I choose to develop becomes the relevant variable. He had left the question there, because it was 3 in the morning by that point and everyone needed sleep. But he had kept thinking about it. The gear activated on Saturday because Matsuda got a volleyball to the face. This was not, by itself, a remarkable event. Matsuda was famously bad at sports that required hand-eye coordination, a fact he accepted with the philosophical calm of someone who had long since made peace with his limitations. The volleyball came from the court next door, cleared the fence at an angle that should not have been geometrically possible, and was going to hit Matsuda directly in the nose at a speed that would have been very painful. Issei caught it. He caught it with his left hand, arm extended, without thinking, without planning, in a motion that he did not understand until after it had happened. His hand glowed red. The volleyball stopped as though it had run into something solid, completely absorbed into his grip. Then the gauntlet appeared. It was red and gold, scaled, and it covered his left arm from fingertip to shoulder. It was warm. It felt, with a completeness that defied logic, like his. It felt like putting on a piece of clothing he had owned his whole life and never reached for. Boost. The voice came from the gauntlet. It was deep and pleased with itself in the specific way of something that had been waiting a long time and was glad to finally be noticed. Matsuda stared. Motohama stared. 3 students from the volleyball court who had come to retrieve the ball stopped walking and stared. Said Matsuda. Interesting, said Issei, looking at his arm. That is one word for it, said the voice from the gauntlet. Rias arrived in 4 minutes, which was impressively fast given that she had presumably been somewhere else doing something else when Kaneko, who had been watching from a respectful distance because Kaneko was always watching from a respectful distance, sent the alert. She looked at the gauntlet. She looked at Issei. She looked at Matsuda and Motohama, who were still standing in exactly the same positions with exactly the same expressions. You too, she said in the tone she used when she expected instant compliance. Walk with me. But, said Matsuda. Now, please. They went. Rias turned back to Issei. Are you hurt? No. I think it activated because I needed to move quickly and I did not have time to choose not to. That is how most gears first activate. Instinct before thought. She was studying the gauntlet with an expression he would later identify as wonder held in extremely careful containment. It is more beautiful than the text described. Thank you, said Drake. Rias looked at the gauntlet. You can speak. I can always speak. Your host simply had not met me yet. It is him, Rias said, and now the wonder was unmistakable. Drake. The Welsh dragon. One of the 2 heavenly dragons. Heavenly dragon, Issei said, testing the words. One of 2. The other is Albion, and we do not need to discuss Albion. There is some history there, Rias said to Issei. I heard that. I know. Issei was quiet for a moment, getting used to the weight of the gauntlet on his arm and the particular warm electric feeling of something very large paying attention through his hand. So what does it actually boost? He asked Drake directly. Everything equally, or does it follow my intent? There was a pause. It was the kind of pause that suggested Drake was deciding whether or not to answer honestly. It follows the host's development. What the host is strongest in amplifies most efficiently. What the host is weakest in amplifies more slowly until the weakness is addressed. So if I am strongest in my mind, it will amplify that first. Yes. And if I develop everything consistently, it amplifies everything consistently. This is technically correct. Most hosts did not ask follow-up questions. Thank you for the information, Issei said. You are welcome, Drake said, in the tone of something that was, despite itself, a little touched. Rias looked at Issei with an expression he recognized now, the revision expression, ticking upward. You just negotiated information out of a heavenly dragon, she said. I asked polite questions, he said. He has never answered polite questions before, she said. In recorded history. A pause. First time for everything, Drake said, and the gauntlet glowed faintly, which Issei was beginning to think was equivalent to a pleased expression. Matsuda and Motohama found out everything, because there was no version of that conversation where they did not. They took it approximately as well as could be expected, which meant Matsuda sat on the floor for 45 minutes and Motohama asked 17 questions, some of which were actually insightful. So you are telling me, Matsuda said eventually, from the floor, that the whole supernatural world is real, there is a dragon in your arm, and this is why you always seem to know things before they happen. The last part is just how I am, Issei said. The dragon is new. The dragon is new, Matsuda repeated. Right. Are you all right? I am having an experience, Matsuda said. I will be fine. Give me another 20 minutes. We will be here. He was. Chapter 6. The Girl Who Counted Stars. She arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the rain air incident, and she arrived with the autumn rain. Issei noticed her first because she was standing in the middle of the main courtyard in the downpour without an umbrella, looking up. The rain was coming down hard enough that visibility across the courtyard was limited to impressions of shape and color. She was a small impression, slight, luminescent somehow, like she was made of something that did not absorb light the way ordinary things did. He walked over with his umbrella. Here, he said, holding it over her. She lowered her gaze from the sky. She had silver-white hair plastered to her face, and her eyes were the color of deep water at night, dark blue shading to black at the edges, and they were full of stars. Not metaphorically. There were points of light moving through her irises like a slow celestial rotation. You will get wet, she said. A little. You already are. It evens out. She tilted her head. It was a slow, precise tilt, the movement of someone who processed information at a speed that made ordinary conversation feel slightly delayed. You are Issei Hayadu, she said. Yes. The one who is not afraid of unusual things. Who told you that? The dragon girl. She said, and I am quoting accurately, he does not perform tolerance, he simply is not bothered. She meant it as the highest possible recommendation. The small girl blinked once, slowly, like an owl. I take it as such. What is your name? Stella Selim. I am a navigator. What do you navigate? Everything, she said simply. The stars tell me where things are and where they are going. I cannot turn it off. It is sometimes inconvenient. She said this with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who had spent a long time making peace with something they could not change. Issei recognized the tone. He had heard it from Tosca. Do you have somewhere to be right now? He asked. I was told to report to the Occult Research Club. Then we are going the same direction. Come on. She walked under his umbrella beside him and looked at the sky through the rain the way other people might look through a window at a comfortable room. Rias had been expecting Stella but had not told Issei, because, as she explained when they arrived, she had not been entirely certain Stella would come. I always came, Stella said. I simply arrived when the variables aligned favorably. You were supposed to arrive last Thursday. The variables did not align favorably on Thursday. There was a brief silence that contained, on Rias's side, a complex negotiation between exasperation and amusement. Sit down, please, she said. Stella sat. She sat the way she stood and moved, with perfect, unhurried precision. She folded her hands in her lap and looked around the room with her starlit eyes cataloging. This room has 14 books that are not listed in the school library system, she said. 3 of them are in languages that are not currently spoken. One of them should not be on a shelf that low. Which one? Aquino asked, with genuine interest. Stella pointed without looking. Aquino looked at the book on the second shelf from the bottom and made a sound of understanding. She is right, Aquino said to Rias. I know, Rias said. She was watching Stella with the expression she usually reserved for things that were genuinely impressive and somewhat inconvenient at the same time. What are you? Kaneko asked. It was not rude. Kaneko's questions were never rude, they were simply very direct. Star Eater, Stella said. My lineage is celestial. My mother was a navigator of the highest order. My father was a scholar who did not understand what he had married but was very happy about it. A pause. He is still happy about it. Issei had the distinct impression that this was a great deal of personal information for Stella to offer unprompted. He filed it carefully. Why are you here? He asked. Specifically? The real reason? Everyone looked at him. It was the kind of question that should have been impolite but was not, because he asked it with complete sincerity rather than challenge. Stella turned her starlit eyes to him. Because the stars have been showing me this location for 3 years, she said. Specifically this school, and more specifically, since 9 weeks ago, one particular student whose gear creates a resonance I have never mapped before. A pause. You have been looking for me, Issei said. The stars have been directing me toward you. I have been following the directions. She blinked her slow blink. I do not usually explain this much. You asked a direct question? I found I wanted to answer it. Something settled in the room, the way things settled when an important piece found its correct position. Then you are welcome here, Issei said, and meant it simply. Stella looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled. It was small and exact, and it rearranged her entire face. The stars concur, she said. Later, after the meeting was done and Stella had been given a locker and a guest ID for the library and a cup of tea that she held in both hands and studied with deep curiosity, Issei sat with her at the window and they watched the rain lighten. Can I ask what navigating actually involves? He said. You can ask anything. She looked at the sky. I read trajectories. Not just physical ones. Every person and situation has a trajectory, a direction they are moving in based on the forces acting on them. The stars show me the significant convergences, the places and moments where trajectories will intersect in ways that change them. What does mine look like? She was quiet for a moment. Then, like something that has been building for a very long time in the dark and is beginning to become light. The convergences around you are numerous and accelerating. You are going to meet a great many things. Good or bad things? Both. But she paused, and her voice was quieter now. The trajectory itself is good. The direction you are moving. It is good. He thought about that. How do you feel about it? He asked. Being able to see all of that. She turned from the window to look at him. Most people do not ask that. I imagine not. I feel, she said, and then was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not finish, like someone who has been looking at a map for a very long time alone. And has just, perhaps, found someone who is interested in the map. He smiled. She looked at it with her cataloging eyes and then looked back at the sky. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. The stars were beginning to appear. Chapter 7. Things that cannot be undone and things that begin. The council summons came on a Friday. Issei was in the chemistry lab finishing his titration report when Kaneko appeared in the doorway with the precise, economical energy of a person who had not run but had moved at the absolute maximum speed that could not technically be called running. Gremory wants you, she said. Now. Finished? His lab partner, a quiet girl named Kiyomi, asked. I will write it up properly tonight and show you before Monday, he said, already standing. She nodded. She was one of 3 students he had noticed who worked at a similar speed to himself, and they had developed a functional partnership without ever discussing it directly. He followed Kaneko. The ORC room held more people than usual. Rias was at the desk. Akino was standing near the window. Tosca was in the corner that had quietly become her preferred position, back to the wall, maximum visibility. Stella was seated on the floor with her legs crossed and her head tilted slightly back, reading the room the way she read everything. And there was a new girl. She was sitting in the chair nearest the door with the exact posture of someone who had been taught good posture and then personally decided to improve on it. She had long dark hair and pale skin and pointed ears that curved to a delicate tip, and her eyes were forest green and currently directed at Issei with an intensity that he classified, after a brief assessment, as deep nervousness performing as calm. This is Lyriel, Rias said. She is an elf. High lineage, Forest Court, she arrived in Ko 3 days ago. She came to me because her family has been targeted by the same fallen angel faction that sent Rainier. Issei looked at Lyriel. Lyriel looked at Issei. Your sacred gear, she said. Her voice was careful and musical, the kind that came from languages with more tonal complexity than Japanese. I can feel it from here. Like a fire in the next room. Does that bother you? No. It is, she paused, searching for the word, orientating. Like hearing a bell that tells you where north is. She looked away, the particular look away of someone who had said more than they intended. I apologize. That was strange to say. Stella navigates by stars and Tosca's eyes glow when she is thinking hard, Issei said. We are past the threshold for strange. Tosca made a sound. It was barely audible. It was, Issei was almost certain, the beginning of a laugh that she had stopped before it fully arrived. Lyriel looked between them, recalibrating. You are all like this? Mostly, Aquino said pleasantly. The briefing was detailed. The Fallen Angel faction, which Rias identified as a splinter group operating without the main governance structure, had been collecting sacred gears and supernatural bloodlines for months. Rainier had been a forward scout. There were more behind her, and the next move would not be as careful or as patient. They want to build something, Rias said. A construct that requires specific components. We do not know yet what the construct does, but the components they have been targeting suggest something that can interact with all three major supernatural factions simultaneously. A weapon, Tosca said flatly. Possibly. Or a key. A key opens things, Stella said from the floor. I do not like that trajectory any more than the weapon one. We need more information, Rias said. And we need to be better prepared. She looked around the room. I am proposing that we formalize what we have been building here. Not a peerage, not a formal supernatural contract. Something more like what Issei proposed from the beginning, a mutually useful arrangement among people who have found that they are stronger together. Silence. Then Aquino said, I have been in Gremory's peerage for 2 years, and I am saying yes. Kaneko said same. Tosca was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned her amber gaze to Issei with the directness of someone asking a question to a single person in a room full of people. You propose this? The core of it, yes, she thought. Then the small nod, formal and complete. Yes. Stella looked up at the ceiling as though consulting something visible only to her. Then, the stars say yes. I say yes. This is the same answer. Everyone looked at Lyriel. She was sitting very straight, and her hands were folded in her lap, and her forest green eyes were bright. I came here, she said carefully, because I had nowhere else to go. My family is in danger, and I am alone in a city I do not know. She looked at Issei. You looked at me when I came in, and you saw that I was nervous, and you made it smaller without making it mean something. I have not had that in a long time. She looked at Rias. Yes. Rias set her hands flat on the desk. Then we are agreed. Afterward, in the hour before sunset when the light came through the ORC windows and long gold bars, Issei stood at the window and thought about the shape of things. Tosca was reading in the corner, which she did now as though the room had always been hers. Stella had fallen asleep on the floor, which apparently she did sometimes when her star reading became very intense and she needed to rest, and Kaneko had put a blanket over her without comment. Lyriel was learning the chess set from Aquino, who was teaching her with patient and slightly dramatic flair. Rias came to stand beside him. How do you feel? She asked. Like something is starting, he said. It is. Are you ready for it? She looked at him. The gold light caught her hair. She had asked him this question once, differently, and he had answered it plainly. He waited to see how she would answer it. I have been ready for a long time, she said. I just did not know what I was ready for. They stood at the window. Outside, the last light of the day was very beautiful. Sentimental, said Drake from the gauntlet. Quiet, Issei said. I meant it affectionately. I know. Still quiet. A low, warm rumble that was definitely a dragon being amused. Rias laughed. It was a small laugh, surprised out of her, and it was the most real sound he had heard her make since they met. He filed it under things to think about later. The folder was getting full. That night, walking home in the dark that was not as dark as it used to be, Issei thought about the word beginning. He had been ordinary. He had been unremarkable. He had been the boy in the second row who drew dragons in his margins and noticed things he did not mention and felt, most of the time, like someone standing outside a very interesting room. The room was open now. He was inside it. And the people in it, each of them strange and brilliant and carrying something heavy and beautiful, had turned to face him with the particular expression of people who had been, in their different ways, waiting for something. For someone. For exactly this. He walked home under the stars, and Drake was warm on his arm, and somewhere behind him the crow called once from its fence post, and fell silent. The city was large. The world was larger. And the thing building in Issei Hayate's chest was not a question anymore. It was a name. His own name. Spoken, for the first time, by the life that was waiting for him. Chapter 8. What the library knows. The week after the group agreed to be a group, Issei went to the library every day. This was not unusual. He had always liked libraries, not for their quiet, though he appreciated that too, but for the specific texture of a room where everyone was trying to understand something. It was, in his experience, one of the few places where thinking was the primary activity, and no one apologized for it. What was unusual was that he was not going for himself. On Monday, he found 3 texts on dragon bloodline suppression techniques and left them in a stack on the corner table where Tosca had begun to sit every afternoon, with a slip of paper that said only the page numbers he thought were relevant. On Tuesday, he located a journal article on celestial navigation as a cognitive process and added it to a folder he had labeled, with deliberate understatement, star stuff, which he slid under the door of the small study room Stella had claimed near the back of the reading floor. On Wednesday, he found a text on High Forest Court customs that he had been searching for since Lyriel mentioned, offhandedly, that she felt guilty about things she could not explain. He brought it to her directly. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at him. How did you know to look for this? You mentioned feeling guilty about things that had no clear cause. In High Court Elf tradition, there are specific ceremonial obligations that create residual guilt if they are not fulfilled on schedule. I thought it might be relevant. She opened the book. Closed it. Looked at the cover. Opened it again. I have not told anyone that, she said quietly. About the guilt. You mentioned it once, in passing, in the ORC room. You did not think I heard. I did not think anyone heard. I always hear, he said. I am sorry if that is intrusive. She shook her head quickly. Her pointed ears had flushed a faint rose pink. It is not. It is, she stopped. Started again. It is the opposite of intrusive. It is, another stop. Thank you? She said it the way people said thank you when they meant something larger than the 2 words contained. Any time, he said, and meant it simply, the way he meant most things. On Thursday, Rias found him in the stacks. She was carrying a book herself, one of the tall, serious volumes from the ORC's private collection, and she was looking at him with the particular expression she had been wearing more frequently lately. It was not the revision expression. It was something quieter than that. You have been researching all of them, she said. The group has needs I can address with existing information. It seemed useful. Tosca told me about the titration notes. I had extra copies. Stella told me about the navigation journal. She seemed interested in the theoretical framework. Lyriel, Rias said, cried in the bathroom for about 10 minutes after you gave her that book, and then came out looking like she had put something down that she had been carrying for a year. He was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. She should put it down. Rias looked at him for a long time. The library was quiet around them. Somewhere in the stacks, a cart of returned books was being moved with a sound like slow, soft thunder. Why? She said. Why what? Why do you do this? You are not their caretaker. You are not obligated. You found this group 3 weeks ago, and you are already, she paused. You are already paying attention to all of them in the specific way that costs something. He thought about how to say it. Because they are interesting. And because they have all been carrying things alone for a long time, and I have a gift for noticing things, and those 2 facts combine into something I can actually do. That's simple. That's simple, he agreed. He looked at her directly. Including you? She blinked. You carry things too, he said. You do not show it the way the others do. But it is there. The library was very quiet. Rias was perfectly still. Then she did something he had only seen her do once before. She let the carefully maintained expression drop, just for a moment, and underneath it was someone who was tired and proud and lonelier than she looked. Yes, she said. Just that. Then you can put some of it down too, he said. If you want to. She looked at him for another long moment. Then she tucked her book under her arm and started back toward the exit. Thank you, Issei, she said. He went back to his research. His chest was doing the thing it did now, warm and complicated, and he had begun to stop trying to file it for later. On Friday, Aquino found him. She did not have a research need. She simply materialized beside him in the periodicals section with 2 cups of tea and set one down next to his notebook without a word. "You did not bring me a book," she said. "I did not know what you needed." "Interesting." She sat on the edge of the reading table, which was technically not allowed. "Most people think they know what I need after about 30 seconds. Most people are working from the surface." She looked at him sideways. Her smile was its usual complex thing, warm and unsettling and deeply personal all at once. "And what does the surface show you?" "Someone who is very comfortable being underestimated. It is a deliberate choice. It gives you information about people." A long silence. "And under the surface?" she said, quieter. "Someone who has been through something that left marks. Someone who decided, at some point, that being formidable was safer than being open. And someone," he said carefully, "who is reconsidering that decision." Aquino drank her tea. She looked at the ceiling. She said nothing for nearly a full minute. "I think," she said finally, "that you might be the most dangerous person in this building. Because I notice things? Because you notice things and then you use what you notice to help." She looked at him. "Most people who are that perceptive use it as leverage. You use it as a gift." He thought about that. "It would be wrong to use it as leverage." "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what makes it extraordinary." She picked up her tea and left, and Issei sat in the periodicals section and thought about the word extraordinary, and wondered why it made him feel both seen and quietly embarrassed at the same time. Chapter 9. The Second Faction Moves. The warning came through Stella on a Sunday morning. She knocked on the door of the ORC room at 7:42, which was earlier than anyone had expected to be there, and she was slightly out of breath, which Issei had never seen before. She was always exactly as calm as a room full of slowly moving stars. "The trajectories changed last night," she said, before anyone said anything to her. "There is a new convergence. Large. Multidirectional. It is not the same faction as before." Ria set down her tea. "How large?" "Large enough that I could see it without looking for it. It came to me." She sat down on the floor, which she did when she needed to process. "There are at least 4 distinct supernatural signatures moving toward Ko. They are coming from different directions and different starting points, which means they are coordinating." "Coordinating suggests communication," Issei said. "Which means someone is organizing them. A faction or a broker. Or a collector," Tosca said from the corner. She had been in the room since 6:30, which was simply how she was on days when she felt like something was wrong. "My family was targeted by a collector. Someone who wanted components, not conquest." "The construct," Ria said, almost to herself. "The one Rainer's faction was building. If Rainer failed to acquire what she needed, the collector would find other agents," Issei said. He was standing at the board, which Rias had given him access to after the 3rd meeting because he kept thinking with spatial reasoning that needed flat surfaces. 4 signatures, coordinated, converging. That is not a follow-up attempt. That is an escalation. They know what they lost when Rainer retreated, Aquino said. She was leaning in the doorway, and the pleasant expression she usually wore had been replaced by something sharper. "They know you have a boosted gear," Issei. "They know Tosca is here. And if they have a star reader of their own," she looked at Stella, "they may know about you too." Stella was quiet for a moment. "My trajectory has been visible for 3 years to anyone with the skill to read it." "Yes. They may know." The room was quiet with the particular quality of people doing rapid, parallel calculations. Lyriel spoke. She was sitting near the window, and she had been very still since Stella's arrival, which was different from her usual polite attentiveness. "The forest court," she said. "My family. If this collector is building something that requires specific supernatural components, a high court elf bloodline is," she stopped. Started again. "We are on lists. My mother told me we were on lists." She said it the way you tell someone a fact that you are hoping will not matter. Issei crossed the room and sat in the chair nearest hers. Not next to her, which might have felt crowded. Near her, which felt different. "Your mother was right that it matters," he said quietly. And she was also right to tell you. It is better to know. She looked at him. I am afraid, she said. Very simply. I know. That is appropriate. The fear is correct information. He held her gaze steadily. What you do with it is where you get to choose. She took a slow breath. Her ears were still. What do? We plan, Issei said, and turned back to the board. The plan took 4 hours to build. It was not the kind of plan that could be summarized in a sentence. It had layers, immediate response protocols for when the 4 signatures entered Koa's boundaries, information gathering priorities for the next 48 hours, contingency branches for 3 different possible objectives the collector might have. Rias directed the broad strokes. Issei filled in the decision logic. Aquino handled the intelligence network, because she had contacts the others did not, and she moved information through them with the efficiency of someone who had been doing it since long before she looked like someone who would. Tosca contributed the tactical assessments, because she thought about threat and movement with the particular fluency of someone who had been a potential target since birth and had learned to read danger the way other people read weather. Stella mapped the convergence trajectories on a separate board with a precision that was, frankly, unsettling, because the lines she drew were not estimates. They were certainties expressed in chalk. Lyriel sat with the forest court record she had brought with her from her family's archives, cross-referencing names and bloodlines against the faction signatures Rias had on file, and found 3 matches that made Rias go very still for approximately 10 seconds. You found this yourself? Rias said. The archive system my mother taught me is optimized for cross-referencing lineages against threat indices. It is the first thing High Court children learn. A pause. I thought it was normal record-keeping until I came here and realized most people do not have a threat index. Most people, Aquino said, do not need one. I know that now. By early afternoon the board was full and everyone knew what they were doing and why, and the plan had 3 virtues that Issei considered essential. It was simple enough to execute under stress, flexible enough to survive unexpected changes, and it kept everyone in a position where they could help each other. Rest today, Rias said. Tomorrow we move to active readiness. People began to gather their things. Issei stayed at the board for a moment, looking at the structure of it. Tosca appeared beside him. She looked at the board too. When my family planned against threats, she said quietly, the plans were always designed to protect the bloodline first. The individual was secondary. This plan is not built that way. No, she said. She looked at the board for another moment. I noticed. She walked away, and Issei looked after her, and thought about the many ways people said things they meant without using the words they meant. Chapter 10. Rain and Scales and a Very Honest Conversation. The rain came back on Monday. It came the way October rain came in Ko. Sideways, committed, with the particular coldness that meant it had traveled a long distance before arriving. The school grounds emptied between classes faster than usual. The covered walkways filled with students moving in tight groups with their shoulders up. Issei found Tosca on the roof. The roof was technically off-limits, but the lock on the access door had been broken for 2 years and the administration's approach to the matter was to occasionally mention in assembly that the roof was off-limits, which had the practical effect of reducing the number of people on the roof but not eliminating them. Tosca was sitting on the raised section near the water tower, her back against the concrete, her face turned up into the rain. Her eyes were closed. Her wings were half extended, not fully open but not folded tight either, somewhere in between, and the rain ran down the dark feathers and fine lines that caught the gray light strangely. Her scales were darker when they were wet, deep forest green, and they shed the water almost completely, which meant she sat dry from the collarbone down while the rain came at her face, and she seemed entirely fine with this arrangement. Issei sat beside her with his umbrella over both of them, which she probably did not need but seemed to appreciate anyway, because she did not move away from it. They were quiet for a while. My wings ache, she said eventually, without opening her eyes. When I fold them for too long. The school uniform has the modified back panel, but it is still constricting. I come up here to let them breathe. How long have you been folding them? Since I was 8. Before that I did not understand that other people found them, she paused, a problem. Who told you they were a problem? The first human school I attended. The other students. Their parents. The administration, politely. Everyone, in different ways. The message was consistent. She opened her eyes and looked at the gray sky. My family is proud of our bloodline. They told me to be proud too. But pride is easier when you are somewhere that agrees with it. And here? She was quiet for long enough that the rain changed direction slightly, easing from sideways to merely downward. Here, she said, you answered a direction question and did not look at my scales first. Your direction question was more urgent. Yes. But most people look at the unusual thing first. You looked at the person first. He did not know what to say to that. He did not say anything, which turned out to be the correct response because she kept going. I have been to 4 schools. I have had, she counted something, internally, 2 conversations that did not feel like I was being studied. This is one of them. What was the other one? A girl at the 2nd school. She had a tail. We were the only 2 students that year who had visible, she chose the word carefully, features. We ate lunch together every day for 1 semester. Then she transferred. Did you stay in contact? No. I did not know how to ask for that. He thought about that. About the specific loneliness of learning too late that a thing you wanted was available. You can ask for it here, he said. If you want to. She looked at him. The rain was lighter now. That was straightforward, she said. It seemed like the straightforward thing was what was needed. A very long pause. Then yes. I would like that. He nodded. She looked back at the sky. Her wings settled, a slow adjustment, and she let out a breath that had been in her chest for what seemed like a long time. They sat on the roof until the bell rang, and neither of them mentioned it later, and neither of them needed to. In chemistry that afternoon, they worked in their usual configuration, Tosca calculating, Issei executing, the titration going smoothly because they had figured out each other's rhythms without discussing it. Halfway through, Kiyomi, Issei's other lab partner from the table to the left, leaned over and said quietly, Did you 2 work out a system or is that just how you are together? Both, Issei said. Tosca, without looking up from her calculations, said, He is precise when it matters. I am fast when it matters. We take turns mattering. Kiyomi looked between them. That is the most functional description of a partnership I have ever heard in a high school chemistry lab. Thank you, Tosca said, still writing. Issei caught Kiyomi's eye and they shared the particular expression of people who have witnessed something that was inadvertently charming. Chapter 11. Drake has opinions. The boosted gear spoke more frequently now. Not constantly. Drake was not the kind of presence that filled silence for its own sake. He spoke when he had something to say, which turned out to be more often than Issei had initially expected, because Drake had been alive for a very long time and had, consequently, a great many observations about the world that he had been unable to share with anyone. You hold the umbrella at the wrong angle, Drake said on Tuesday morning, as Issei walked to school. It is raining from the northeast. The angle accounts for the wind. A pause. That is correct. I withdraw my observation. Thank you for the feedback. I was testing you. You were not. I was slightly testing you. Issei smiled and kept walking. The training sessions had begun. Rias had proposed them and Issei had agreed immediately, because the logic was obvious. If a collector with 4 agents was converging on Ko, everyone needed to be better than they currently were. The ORC room was too small for anything practical, so they used the old gymnasium, the one the student council had been attempting to renovate for 2 years and had consequently abandoned in a state of constructive chaos that made it ideal for training. The approach was Issei's design, because Rias had looked at him after the planned session and said plainly, You think about systems. Design the training system. He had done so. The sessions were individual, and then collective. Each person worked on their specific capability first, then they worked on combinations, because the point was not for everyone to be maximally powerful alone but for the group to function as an integrated system where each person's strength covered another person's gap. Issei trained his gear by posing it increasingly complex problems. Boost, Drake announced, on the 3rd day, when Issei's speed had doubled for the 4th consecutive session. What is the mechanism? Issei asked, in the immediate aftermath, when he was sitting with his back against the gymnasium wall, and his arm pleasantly warm. You know the mechanism. You worked it out in the first week. I want to confirm it. The boost amplifies what exists. You are fast because you moved fast first. You are strong because you trained first. The gear takes what is real and makes it more real. It does not manufacture capability from nothing. So the ceiling, Issei said, is whatever I build. The gear multiplies the foundation. If the foundation is larger, the multiplied result is larger. Yes. Then the most efficient path is building the foundation as broadly as possible before relying on the multiplier. A pause that felt, somehow, approving. Most hosts wanted the multiplier immediately, Drake said. I want it to matter when I use it, Issei said. That requires building something worth multiplying. You are very strange for a host. You have mentioned. I mean it differently now than I did then. Issei looked at the gauntlet. I know, he said. The collective sessions were harder and more interesting. Tosca's combat instincts were excellent, but she was accustomed to fighting alone, which meant she made decisions at a speed that did not leave room for coordination. The work was not to slow her down but to create a shared language fast enough to keep up with her. Stella could read trajectories in real time, but her physical speed was not exceptional, which meant she needed to be in a position where her information could reach the right person quickly. Lyriel had capabilities she had not fully explored, because the forest court tradition was conservative about certain kinds of power, and she had internalized that conservatism. The work there was partly technical and partly something else. You are allowed to use the full extent of what you have, Issei told her, on the fourth day, when she had once again held back at the critical moment. I know that intellectually, she said, but not in your body yet. She looked at her hands. In the forest court, using the full capability was considered, she searched for the word, presumptuous. You were meant to use precisely what was necessary, and no more. That is good philosophy for peacetime management of a forest, he said. It is not good philosophy when someone is trying to take you apart. She laughed, which surprised both of them. It was a small, startled laugh, and it briefly made her look much younger than she usually did. No, she agreed. It is not. When the moment comes, Issei said, use everything. We will work backward from whatever happens and figure out the right calibration after. But first we need to know what everything looks like. She straightened her spine in the particular way of someone deciding something. On the next pass, she used everything. The gymnasium glowed faintly green for 30 seconds. Kaneko, who was watching from the bleachers, said oh in a tone of genuine, understated respect. Lyriel looked at her own hands afterward. Her pointed ears were flushed rose-pink again. I did not know I could do that, she said. Now you do, Issei said. Chapter 12. The Star's Name 4. Stella identified the 4 agents on Wednesday evening. She was in the ORC room with her star charts spread across the large table, and everyone else was arranged around the room in their habitual positions, which had solidified over the past weeks into something that felt like a shared language of space. Tosca at the back left. Lyriel near the window. Aquino by the bookshelves. Kaneko on the couch. Rias at the desk. Issei standing, because he thought more clearly on his feet. The first signature is chimeric, Stella said, tracing a line on the chart. Multiple bloodlines, none dominant. The trajectory suggests someone who changes shape or alignment, possibly a shapeshifter or a hybrid of an uncommon kind. Coming from the coast. The second is large, she continued. Not physically large necessarily. The signature is large. Dense. Something very old, or something that carries very old power. From the mountains. Old power in the mountains, Aquino said thoughtfully. That could be a Yukiana lineage. Or something related to the old river spirits. The third is subtle. I almost missed it. It is moving inside other trajectories deliberately, using the convergences of other people's paths to hide its own. That requires significant skill, or an innate ability. An agent with concealment as a natural trait, Issei said. Not magical concealment. Natural. What kind of creature conceals naturally? Several, Rias said. But given the mountain origin of the second signature and the coastal origin of the first, if we are looking at a coordinated team, a kitsune would fit the third. Multiple tails produce natural interference in supernatural detection. And the fourth? Issei asked. Stella was quiet for a moment. When she looked up, her starlit eyes had a quality he had not seen in them before. something that was almost reverence. The fourth is not coming to take, she said. The fourth is coming to give a warning. I cannot tell you more than that because the trajectory is intentionally opaque. Whoever this is, they do not want to be read easily. But the intent is different from the other three. The other three are instruments. The fourth is a messenger. The room processed this. A messenger from whom? Rias asked. The trajectory originates, Stella said slowly, from somewhere inside the faction structure. Near the top. A defector, Tosca said. Or someone with a conscience, Lyriel said quietly. The two are not mutually exclusive, Issei said. He was looking at the chart. 3 threats and 1 warning. The collector is sending the 3. The fourth is moving independently, which means someone inside the operation has decided we should know something before the 3 arrive. He looked at Rias. We need to find the fourth before the other 3 do. Agreed, Rias said. Stella, can you track the fourth separately? I already am, Stella said. She pointed to a small mark on the chart, separate from the 3 main convergence lines. They will reach the school boundary in approximately 36 hours. Then we have 36 hours, Rias said, and the room shifted into the focused energy of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Later, after the meeting, Issei stood in the hallway outside the ORC room and thought about messengers. He thought about the specific bravery of moving against the current of a thing you are part of, carrying a warning that could cost you everything if delivered. He thought about what it meant to decide that the warning was worth it anyway. Aquino found him there. You are thinking about the fourth, she said. Yes. So am I. She leaned against the wall beside him. She was quiet for a moment, which was unusual enough that he looked at her. She was looking at the floor. I know what it is like to be inside something you are not sure of. To carry information that feels wrong to keep. He did not ask. He waited. I was not always entirely myself, she said. Before Rias. There was a period where I did not know which direction was mine. She looked up. The fourth is going to be frightened. Whoever they are. Yes. Make sure they know they are safe before you ask them anything. I was planning to, he said. She smiled, and this time the warmth reached all the way to the edges. I know. I wanted to say it anyway. Chapter 13. The Fox at the Gate. The fourth arrived in the form of a girl with 9 tails. Or rather, she arrived in the form of a girl who appeared to have no tails, was dressed in an oversized university hoodie, was carrying a convenience store bag that contained what turned out to be 3 onigiri and a can of green tea, and was sitting on the school steps at 6 in the morning with the expression of someone who had been awake for 30 hours and had long since moved past tired into a kind of philosophical acceptance. Issei was there because Stella had updated the timeline at 4 in the morning with a message that said simply, "She is coming now." He had gotten up, made tea, arrived at the school at 5:50, and was sitting on the steps with his own thermos when the girl appeared from the morning mist of the school path. She stopped when she saw him. He held up his thermos. Tea? She stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were amber, like Tosca's but lighter, honey-colored, and they were assessing him with a speed that suggested whatever concealment she was carrying. Her mind was not concealed. You are the one with the boosted gear, she said. Issei Hayadu. Yes. And you are the fourth. You know about me. Our navigator has been tracking your trajectory. She said your intent was different from the other 3. He held the thermos toward her again. It is cold. Sit down. She came forward slowly, the way a person moved when they had decided to trust something but were still reserving the right to change their mind. She sat 2 steps below him, which put her at a slight distance, and accepted the tea. My name is Karama, she said. Karama Yui. I am a 9-tailed kitsune. Technically, I have 9 tails. I keep them hidden. It requires, she looked tired, significant effort, at all times, without break, and I have been doing it for 3 days straight, while also traveling from the north. You can let them down here, Issei said. The school grounds are warded. No one outside the group will see. She looked at him. Looked at the school. Looked at him again. Then, with the slow exhale of someone releasing something they have been clenching, the tails appeared. They were white, tipped with silver, and there were 9 of them, and they spread around her like a slow sunrise. The morning light caught the silver tips and turned them gold. She sat in the middle of them and closed her eyes, and the expression on her face was the particular expression of a person who is finally, briefly, not in pain. "Thank you," she said. "Of course." They sat in the quiet morning for a few minutes. A crow landed on the gate. Issei looked at it. It looked at him. It was, he was fairly certain, the same crow it had always been. "The three," Kurama said eventually. "The ones coming after us." "After you?" "I know what they were told to do. I am listening." "They were told to bring back specific components. The boosted gear. A high court bloodline. A celestial navigator." She opened her eyes. The dragon hybrid was not on the original list. She was added after Rainier reported what she had seen. The collector upgraded the objective. "What is the construct for?" She was quiet for a moment. "It is a door," she said. "Not a weapon. A door that can be opened from the supernatural side into the human world, broadly, not at a single location, everywhere simultaneously. If it works," she stopped. "If it works, the boundary comes down," Issei said. "For 1 hour. Maybe less. Maybe more. The calculations are not precise. But in that hour," she did not finish. He finished it. "In that hour, everything that exists on the supernatural side can enter freely, and everything that is currently structured to prevent that will not function." "Yes." He looked at the school. The first students would arrive in about an hour. They would come through the gate in their uniforms, talking about weekend plans, carrying lunches packed by their families. They did not know that the morning mist had a 9-tailed kitsune in it. They did not know that 2 weeks ago a fallen angel had tried to take the sacred gear of the boy in the second row. They did not need to know. That was the point of the whole arrangement, the thing that had been built over centuries. They did not need to know, and they should not have to know, and the people who knew were supposed to make sure they never had to. "Why did you come?" he asked. "Because I was part of the operation for 6 months before I understood what I was helping build. And when I understood it, I could not ununderstand it." She looked at her hands. "And because, a pause, I have tails. I live in the in-between, same as all of them do, all of you do. The boundary is not just a convenience for humans. It is what makes it possible for people like me to exist without being hunted." "You came to protect your own world," he said. "I came to protect both," she said. "Same thing." He stood and extended his hand. The boosted gear was not active, but his palm was warm in the particular way it was when Drake was paying close attention. "Welcome to Ko," he said. "Come inside. There are people you should meet." She looked at his hand for a moment. Then she took it. Her grip was firm and her skin was very warm, and 9 silver-tipped tails brushed past him as she stood, and Issei Hayate thought, the world keeps getting larger. Chapter 14. 6 people in a room and what they are building. Kurama Yui sat in the ORC room with her 9 tails visible, which she said she had not done in the presence of people who were not family since she was 12 years old. Nobody stared. Kiniko offered her a rice ball from the supply she kept in the cabinet above the chess set, which Kurama accepted with the careful gravity of someone receiving something more significant than a snack. Liriel moved her chair to give the tails more room, practically, without comment, which made Kurama look at her with an expression of quiet surprise. "Thank you," Kurama said. "Of course," Liriel said, in exactly the same tone Issei had used on the steps, which made Kurama look between them for a moment. "You all do that," she said. "That tone." "What tone?" Akino asked. "The of course tone. Like consideration is the default and everything else is the exception." The room was briefly quiet. "We have one of those," Tosca said, and nodded toward Issei, who was at the board beginning to map the new information. "I heard that," Issei said. "It was a compliment," Tosca said. Kurama looked at all of them and then looked at Issei, specifically, with the assessing amber eyes that had been assessing everything since she arrived. "You built this," she said. "We built it together. Someone set the tone first." He did not answer that, because the board needed attention. But Rias, from the desk, watched the exchange with the quiet, contained expression she wore when she was holding something carefully. The intelligence Kurama carried reorganized everything. The 3 agents had names now: Mira, who was the shape-changer from the coast, a sea chimera with 6 possible forms and no consistent vulnerability profile. Burrow, the large signature from the mountains, which turned out to be a glacier-born Yukiana whose power was tied to cold and stasis, dangerous in sustained engagement, significantly less so if the engagement was fast and unpredictable. And Sable, the concealment specialist, who was not a kitsune but something older, a shadow weaver with the ability to occupy spaces between things rather than the things themselves. The shadow weaver is the most dangerous, Kurama said. Not because of offensive capability. Because you cannot plan against something you cannot locate. Stella can locate it, Issei said. Your navigator? Celestial lineage. She reads trajectories through interference. If Sable is moving through shadow, Stella will see the absence. Kurama looked at Stella, who was on the floor with her charts. Stella looked up. I already see it, she said. It is interesting. The absence has a shape. Then we use that, Issei said, and updated the board. The plan reformed around the new information with the efficiency of something that had been well designed to begin with. The original structure was sound. It just needed new inputs. The 3 will come together, Kurama said. They were instructed to coordinate on final approach. It prevents any single one from being isolated, so we need to be able to respond to all 3 simultaneously, Rias said. Or we give them a reason to separate, Issei said. Everyone looked at him. They are coordinating because the collector told them to. But they were recruited individually, which means they have individual objectives and individual risk tolerances. If each of them believes they can get what they came for faster by moving independently, they will. You want to create information that makes each of them think they have an advantage the others do not, Aquino said slowly. I want to create information that is true and that each of them will interpret according to their individual interests. He turned from the board. Kurama. You know how they think. What does Mira want most? Recognition. She is the youngest. She has been overlooked. Burrow? To be left alone, honestly. She took this commission because she had a debt. She does not want to be here. And Sable? Kurama was quiet for a moment. Sable wants the door to work. True believer. The construct is not just a mission to them. Then we handle them differently, Issei said. 3 approaches. 1 battle plan. Kurama, I need you to help me understand each of them well enough to speak to what they want. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, firmly, and moved her chair closer to the board. They worked until midnight. Around 10 o'clock, Rias made them all stop for 20 minutes and eat, because she had noticed that planning at high intensity on empty stomachs produced worse decisions. The 20 minutes turned into 30 because Kurama, given a proper meal for the first time in 3 days, turned out to have the specific, dry humor of someone who had been surviving on irony and rice crackers for 6 months undercover, and things she said quietly while eating kept making Aquino and Tosca make sounds of involuntary amusement. I like her, Tosca said, at one point, to no one in particular. It was the most direct social endorsement Tosca had offered anyone. Kurama looked at her with the startled sincerity of someone who had not expected to be liked, and had not prepared for the feeling. She started. Thank you. You are welcome, Tosca said, and went back to her food. Issei watched this from across the table and thought about the specific texture of a group of people who had all learned to hold themselves carefully, and were now, slowly, practicing how to put the careful down. They are good, Drake said quietly, which was as close to tender as a heavenly dragon got. Yes, Issei said under his breath. They are. Chapter 15. The Glacier and the Fox and the Moment Before. The 3 arrived on Thursday. They came, as Kurama had predicted, together, entering Koa's boundary at 11 in the morning during the busiest part of the school day, which was strategic because the movement of hundreds of humans created a kind of noise in the supernatural detection field that made precise tracking difficult. It would have made precise tracking difficult. Stella had been awake since 4 in the morning and had the convergence tracked to the minute. Northwest corner of the park at 11:17, she said, at 10:50. Mira will be in the form of a jogger. Burrow will have reduced her signature to approximately human level, which is impressive but not invisible. Sable will be in the space between the 2 benches on the south path, which from the outside will look like nothing. Between the benches, Aquino said. Clever. Clever, but it requires them to have a line of sight to you to anchor the between space. Obstacle between them and the target breaks the anchor. So we use the fountain, Issei said. The fountain, Stella confirmed. Issei looked at the group. They were in the old gymnasium, in their training positions, and they looked like what they had become, people who knew what they were doing and trusted the people on either side of them. The goal is not to defeat them, he said for the third time, because he wanted it to be the thing everyone held on to when it was happening. The goal is to give each of them a reason to stop. We are not here to be heroes. We are here to be reasonable. And if reasonable does not work, Tosca said, then we are also here to be thoroughly impractical for anyone trying to take something that belongs to us. Her amber eyes glowed faintly. Good. At 11:17, the northwest corner of the park was occupied by a jogger who ran in a pattern that was slightly too precise to be natural. A woman sitting on a bench reading a book who was absolutely still in a way that no human being sitting outside in October was absolutely still, and nothing between the two benches on the south path, which was the particular nothing that Stella had described. Issei walked in from the east entrance, alone. He walked at the pace of someone going somewhere. Not hurrying. Not looking around. The boosted gear was dormant, which he had practiced, because he wanted it dormant until the exact moment it was not. He passed the fountain. He sat on the bench on the north side. He took out a book. They are watching you, Drake said quietly. I know. All three. I know. You are very calm. I am moderately calm, Issei said. There is a difference. The jogger slowed near the fountain. She stopped, stretching with the exaggerated thoroughness of someone who had decided to take a break. She was watching him over her shoulder with eyes that had shifted, fractionally, from gray to something more iridescent. Mira. The woman on the bench turned a page she had not read. Between the south path benches, the nothing shifted. Issei set his book down and looked at the jogger directly. Mira, he said. Conversationally. That is a good form. The change from the coastal variant is subtle. The jogger went very still. I know you are all three here, he said, at normal volume, not raising it, not performing anything. I also know what you were sent for. I am going to ask you to hear something before this becomes complicated. A long, suspended silence. Then Mira dropped the jogger form entirely, which took less than 2 seconds and left her standing in her natural state, tall, iridescent, with 4 arms and the particular stillness of something that was deciding whether to trust. The woman on the bench looked up. Her eyes had gone white with cold. The temperature around her dropped 10 degrees. The nothing between the south benches thickened. Speak, said a voice from the nothing. Sable. It was a voice like silk being cut. The construct does not work, Issei said. Not the way the collector told you it would. The calculations are based on a flawed premise. Karama found the error 6 weeks ago and was going to report it, but the collector terminated the review before she could. Silence. Karama is dead, Sable said. Karama is in this city, Issei said. She has been here for 2 days. She came ahead of you to tell us what you were bringing. She is alive and she has the error document. Another silence. This one was the kind where multiple people were rapidly reconsidering a great many things. You are saying the collector deceived us, Mira said. Her 4 arms were crossed in a configuration that read, regardless of how many arms were involved, as someone who wanted to believe you but needed more. I am saying the collector gave you a mission based on information that was incomplete at best and deliberately falsified at worst. The door construct as designed will not produce a 1-hour window. The calibration is wrong by an order of magnitude. The window, if it opens, does not close. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees. Burrow had stood. Does not close, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement delivered with the weight of someone who understood exactly what that meant. Not on its own. Not without a significant intervention. And given the scale, he did not finish. He did not need to, Sable, Burrow said. I heard, said the voice from the nothing. A very long pause. Show us the error document, Mira said. Issei reached into his jacket and produced a folder. He set it on the bench beside him. He stood up and stepped back, which put him 6 feet away from it, which was the distance that said, take it without feeling like a transaction. Mira came forward. She took the folder. she read. The temperature stopped dropping. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes of Mira reading, of Burrow reading over her shoulder, of the nothing between the benches being very still. Then Mira set the folder down and looked at Issei. Where is Karama? He looked at the tree line on the east side. Karama walked out. Her 9 tails were visible in the October afternoon, white and silver, moving around her like water. Mira made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound of relief and fury arriving at the same moment. You are alive, she said. I am alive, Karama said. And I am sorry I could not reach you sooner. The temperature came all the way back up. Burrow sat down on the bench, heavily, with the particular exhaustion of someone for whom the stakes had just shifted entirely. I took a debt commission for this, she said. To no one in particular. We know, Issei said. I have a proposal for resolving that debt through different means, if you want to hear it. She looked at him. You prepared for this possibility too. I prepared for most possibilities. Most? I try not to plan for everything. It makes the surprises less interesting. Something moved through Burrow's wide eyes. Not warmth, exactly. Something adjacent to it. Wry acknowledgement, perhaps. Speak, said Sable again, from the nothing between the benches. But the voice was different now. The silk-cut quality was still there, but the edge was gone. Issei sat back down and began to talk, and behind him, in the tree line and on the rooftops, and in the positions they had held for the past hour, 6 people who trusted him let out a collective breath. Chapter 16. What comes after the fight that was not quite a fight? The aftermath of the park meeting occupied the rest of Thursday and all of Friday. Burrow's debt was the most practical problem and turned out to be solvable because the debt was financial in nature and Rias's family had resources that made most financial problems solvable. The negotiation was conducted with precise formality on both sides, and when it was completed, Burrow looked at Rias with the respect of someone who had dealt with many negotiators and was silently classifying this one. Your family, Burrow said. Gremory, Rias confirmed. I have heard of your family. Most people have. I had heard that the air was proud and difficult. Rias smiled, and it was the smile she wore when she was acknowledging something without disputing it. I am sometimes proud. I try not to be difficult. The negotiation was entirely fair, Burrow said. I know. Burrow was quiet for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She took off her coat and held it out. It is cold at night here. For the elf. Everyone looked at Liriel, who looked at the coat, which was large enough to wrap around her twice and was made of something that felt, when she touched it, like the inside of a snowfall. Thank you, Liriel said, with the particular care of someone receiving something they understood was more than it appeared. The cold courts and the forest courts have historically not been friendly, Burrow said, which was a very long way of saying something else entirely. This is a gesture toward the possibility of different. Liriel put on the coat. It came to her knees and the sleeves went past her hands and she looked, in it, like someone who had been cold for a long time and had just found a place to be warm. Different is good, she said. Mira was harder to settle, not because she was hostile but because she was 23 years old and had been running missions for a faction she now understood had been lying to her for the better part of 2 years. And the process of sitting with that understanding was not quick. Issei sat with her in the ORC room on Friday afternoon, which was a choice he made because it seemed like what was needed, not a solution, not a plan, just presence. I am not angry at you, she said, which he had not asked. I know. I am angry at myself. For not knowing? For not asking. She looked at her 4 hands. In her natural form she was genuinely beautiful, iridescent and strange and very much herself, and she looked at herself like someone who had spent years making themselves smaller, and was now relearning the actual size. I did not ask because asking felt like doubting, and doubting felt disloyal. That is how people get kept, Issei said. By making doubt feel like betrayal. She looked at him. How old are you? 16. She was quiet for a moment. The youngest person in this building is the one making me understand things I have been avoiding for 2 years. I have less history to work around, he said. Fresh eyes. Don't undersell it, she said flatly. That is not a fresh eyes thing. That is a you thing. He did not respond to that, because he genuinely did not know how. Mira, watching his expression, did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a real laugh, free and startled, and it changed her face entirely. You don't know what to do with a compliment, she said. I know what to do with it, he said. I just don't know what to say back. You say thank you? Thank you? Good. She leaned back in her chair. Some of the tension in her shoulders had been released by the laugh and had not returned. What do I do now? You rest. You eat something. And then, he said, you decide what you want, not what someone else told you to want. And you pursue that. Is it that simple? The deciding is simple. The doing takes time. But the deciding is just one question: what is actually mine? She looked at him for a long moment. I want to study, she said. My forms. The theory of them. There is an academic tradition in the Eastern chimeric schools that I was told was not practical. But I want it. Then pursue that. I will need, she hesitated, resources? And possibly introductions. Rias can help with resources. Kurama knows the Eastern networks. Liriel's family archive has a section on chimeric lineage theory that she has already offered to share. He looked at her steadily. You are not alone with this. She stared at him. You prepared for this too, she said. I thought it was possible you might want something specific, and if I had wanted something different, then I would have found different resources. Mira was quiet for a very long moment. You are extraordinarily strange, she said finally. So I have been told. I mean it as a compliment. I know. Thank you? She smiled. It was the first smile of hers he had seen, and it was, he thought, quite wonderful. Sable remained the open question. They had not seen Sable since the park, but they knew they were in the city because Stella's absence reading still showed the distinctive shadow-shaped nothing moving through Ko at intervals. Not threatening. Not departing. Thinking, Stella said, when asked. They are deciding something, Stella said. What? Rias asked. I cannot read the content. Only the weight. How heavy? Issei asked. Stella looked at her charts for a moment. Like someone choosing between two very different futures. Issei nodded. Then we wait, he said. You cannot rush that kind of decision. You have been patient with all of them, Rias observed. They all came here with something they needed to put down before they could pick up anything new. Rushing that would just mean they put it down badly. Rias looked at him. That quiet, warm, contained expression. Yes, she said. Exactly that. Chapter 17. The Shadow Chooses. Sable came on Saturday morning. Not to the school. To Issei's house. He knew they were there before he went downstairs because the quality of the silence in the kitchen was different at 7 in the morning, a specific density that Stella had taught him to recognize. He made 2 cups of tea and brought one to the back porch, where the garden was mostly bare, and the autumn air was sharp and clean. He set the second cup on the porch railing and sat down with his own. For a while nothing happened. Then the air between the old cedar tree and the garden wall thickened, and a person stepped out of it. Sable was taller than he had expected from a voice alone. They had silver-gray hair cut close on one side and longer on the other, and their eyes were the specific dark color of shadows at noon, when the sun is directly overhead and the shadows are short and very dark. Their clothing was impractical for the season, and they were wearing it as though temperature was not something that applied to them, which was probably accurate. They looked at the tea. They picked it up. They drank it. I have been watching your group for 2 days, Sable said. From the in-between spaces. I know, Issei said. You know. Stella told me you were present at most of the significant conversations. I let her know. We continued the conversations normally. A pause. You did not try to detect me or drive me out. You were not threatening. And I thought you probably needed to see for yourself. Sable was quiet for a long moment. They were looking at the garden. In the park, they said. You told Burrow you had prepared for the possibility of the debt. You told Mira you had resources ready for her specific interest. But you could not have known what they would want. I made educated guesses based on Kurama's descriptions, and what I could infer about people who had been in a coercive situation for an extended period. And for me? I did not have enough information about you for a specific guess. Kurama said you believed in the construct's purpose. That you were not simply following orders. I believed the world would be better if the boundary came down, Sable said. Controlled. Managed. Not the catastrophic version. The version where people like me do not have to choose between existing and being safe. That is a real problem, Issei said. Sable looked at him sharply. They had been expecting argument. The boundary as it exists is not perfect, Issei continued. It was built for stability, not for equity. The people it protects are primarily the ones who are already stable. The people it inconveniences are primarily the ones who are already managing the most. You understand that. It would be difficult to spend 3 weeks with the people I have spent 3 weeks with and not understand that, he said. He looked at the garden. But the construct was not going to solve that. It was going to produce a crisis that would end badly for everyone, including the people it was supposed to help. The collector was using a real problem to justify a solution that would have been catastrophic. I know that now, Sable said. Their voice was very quiet. I knew it after the park. The error document, they stopped. I had trusted the calculations. I did not check them independently because I trusted the principle. People often stop checking when they agree with the goal. Yes. They drank their tea. A bird in the cedar made a short, questioning sound. What do you want? Issei asked. Sable turned the cup in their hands. I want the problem to be solvable through something other than catastrophe. That is a good thing to want, Issei said. And it is a problem that I think this group is going to work on, in the long run. Not because we plan to, but because most of the people in it are exactly the people the current system does not account for well. That is not a solution, Sable said. No. It is a beginning. A long quiet. The cedar tree moved in a slow morning wind. I would like, Sable said, very carefully, to be part of a beginning, then be part of it. I am not easy to be around. None of us are, particularly. We have managed. The shadow at the corners of the garden shifted slightly. Not threatening. Something like adjusting. All right, Sable said. They finished their tea. They set the cup back on the railing with the precise care of someone who was not used to being a guest and was trying to do it correctly. How do I? They started and stopped. You come to the school. You ask for the Occult Research Club. You sit down. He looked at them. The rest of it figures itself out. That is a significant amount of trust to place in a process you have just described. It worked for the others. A pause. Something that was not quite a smile moved through Sable's expression. I will come Monday, they said. We will be there. Sable stepped back. The garden air thickened. Then they were gone, and the cedar was just a cedar, and the morning was just a morning. Issei sat on the porch for another few minutes with his tea. His parents would be awake soon. His mother would ask about breakfast. His father would ask about school. He would answer both questions normally. His life was, from the outside, entirely ordinary. He thought about that and found it genuinely funny, in a quiet way. Sable seems interesting, Drake said. Everyone is interesting. You find everyone interesting. I do. Is that exhausting? He thought about it seriously, because Drake asked things seriously and deserved serious answers. No, he said. It is the opposite of exhausting. It is, he searched for the word, sustaining. Drake was quiet for a moment. The gauntlet was warm even when dormant, he had noticed. Always warm. I have been in arms that fought wars, Drake said. Arms that craved power like thirst. Arms that broke under the weight of what they carried. And I have never been in an arm that thought the way you think. Issei set down his tea. I am going to take that as a compliment. It was meant as the highest possible compliment I know how to give. Inside the house, his mother called his name for breakfast. He stood. He picked up both cups. He went inside. Outside, the autumn morning was clear and cold and very blue, and somewhere in the direction of Ko Academy, 7 people were getting up and going about their Saturdays, carrying their particular strangeness through the ordinary world, finding it a little lighter than it had been the week before. A crow called once from somewhere nearby. Issei did not hear it, because he was inside now. But it called, the way it always did, like a question that had become an answer. Like a name spoken by the life that was waiting. Chapter 18. Monday and what it brought. Monday arrived with the specific energy of a day that had decided to be important. Issei felt it before he opened his eyes. It was the quality of the light through his curtains, too sharp for the season, and the unusual quiet of the street outside, the kind of quiet that happened when the world was holding its breath between one thing and the next. He lay in bed for exactly 3 minutes, which was his habit on days that felt significant, letting the day settle around him before he moved into it. Then he got up, made tea, and went to school. Sable was waiting at the school gate at 7:55, standing at the edge of the shadow cast by the old stone pillar, which was probably a coincidence and probably also was not. They were wearing a school uniform, which had not existed the previous day, and which fit them with the particular exactness of clothing that had been created rather than purchased. Issei stopped beside them. You made the uniform. Shadows conform to expectation when directed carefully. A pause. I thought it was appropriate to look the part. It is. Come on. They walked through the gate together. The morning light caught them both, and Sable's shadow stretched long and deliberate behind them, and 2 crows on the gate posts watched them go without comment, which felt, in a way Issei could not entirely articulate, like an endorsement. The ORC room received Sable the way it had received everyone, with the particular, practical warmth of people who had decided that the door was open and meant it. Kaneko looked up from her book. New person. Sable said. Kaneko. She looked at them for a moment with the direct, assessing gaze that she brought to everything. Your shadow is doing something interesting. It always is. I meant it as an observation, not a complaint. I know. Thank you. Kurama was in the corner she had claimed after 2 days, which was the corner opposite Tosca's, and the two of them had developed an arrangement that Issei had observed with quiet appreciation. Tosca occupied her corner and Kurama occupied hers, and the space between them was shared without negotiation, the way competent people shared resources when they trusted each other's sense of what was needed. Kurama looked at Sable. Sable looked at Kurama. Some kind of communication passed between them that was faster and more complete than words. You came, Kurama said. You doubted it? I hoped. Doubting and hoping are not the same thing. Sable sat in the remaining chair, the one that had been empty since the group expanded, as though it had been waiting for exactly this shape of person. Rias, watching from the desk, looked at Issei. He gave her the small nod that meant, yes, this is how it was supposed to go. She returned it, and something in her expression was the warmth and pride combination that she still tried to contain, and still failed to contain entirely. The morning meeting was operational. They were not done. 3 agents had been redirected. The collector remained. Reina retreated, Rias said. She will have reported back. The collector knows we dismantled the second attempt. Which means they know we have Kurama, Aquino said. And by extension, the error document. The error document, Sable said, was not the only copy. The collector has the original calculations. They will have started revising them the moment they knew the document was compromised. How long to revise? Issei asked. Weeks. Possibly longer. The error was structural, not superficial. Fixing it requires rebuilding the base model. So we have a window, Tosca said. We have a window, Issei confirmed. He went to the board. The question is what we do with it. We can wait for the next move and respond. Or we can use this time to go to the source. The room was quiet with the specific quality of people absorbing the weight of an option. The collector, Rias said. You are talking about finding the collector. I am talking about finding them before they find a way to finish what they started. He looked at the board. We have 4 people in this room who were inside their operation. We have a navigator who can read intent through trajectory. We have, he paused, more than enough to work backward from the known facts to the source, if we do it carefully. It will take time, L'Oreal said. Yes. And it will not be safe, Mira added. She was sitting near the window and her 4 arms were arranged in the configuration he now recognized as focused engagement. The collector is careful. And they are old. I know, Issei said. But safe is not the goal. The goal is resolved. Safe is a process requirement, not a destination. Drake made a sound in the gauntlet. It was not a word. It was the sound of a very old thing being quietly impressed. We start today, Rias said. Chapter 19. The Art of Working Backward. The investigation required a different kind of thinking than the planning had. Planning was forward-facing. You knew your starting point, you identified your goal, you built the path between them. Investigation was the reverse. You had fragments of outcome, and you had to reason backward through the choices that produced them until you found the origin. Issei had always been good at this. It was the same skill that let him hear a half-finished sentence, and know what the speaker had decided not to say. You worked from the visible to the invisible, from the effect to the cause, from the word on the surface to the thought underneath it. He sat in the ORC room with everything they collectively knew spread across every surface, and he began. The known facts were these. The collector had been operating for at least 2 years. In that time they had recruited from at least 3 different supernatural factions, which meant they had access to multiple networks and the credibility to move within them. They had technical capability sufficient to design a construct of significant complexity. They had resources that could fund extended operations in multiple cities simultaneously. They had also made specific targeting choices: a boosted gear, a high court elf bloodline, a celestial navigator, a dragon hybrid. These were not random. They were components. The construct required these specific types because of what each one contributed to the underlying mechanism. The construct is a resonance device, Stella said from the floor, when Issei voiced this. She had been quiet for an hour, reading her charts, and she said it in the tone of someone confirming something they had been working toward. Not a door in the mechanical sense. A resonance that creates temporary coherence between layers. Each component tunes a different frequency. Which means, Issei said, that whoever designed it understands layered resonance theory at an expert level. That is a very specific field, Rias said. How specific? Issei asked. Rias and Aquino exchanged a look. Handful of practitioners, Aquino said. In the current generation. Fewer in the last. It was considered a dangerous specialty after the incident in Prague in the 17th century. What was the incident in Prague? Someone built something similar, and it worked briefly, in the wrong way. How wrong? A pause. Wrong enough that the field was suppressed afterward and most of the documentation was sealed. But someone unsealed it, Sable said quietly. They had been listening from the corner with their particular stillness, their shadow folded precisely beneath their chair. The collector's design is too accurate to be working from reconstruction. They have the original documents. Which means they have access to sealed archives, Issei said. Or, Karama said slowly, they are old enough to have been there. The room went still. Prague was 400 years ago, Rias said. Yes, said Karama. And there are things that old, that are still active, that no one in current generation politics thinks about very often because they stopped being visible. She looked at her hands. Her 9 tails had gone very still. I have been thinking about who commissioned the operation originally. Not who recruited me, that was a middle agent. Above them. Who has the resources, the knowledge, the specific interest in these exact components, and the patience to have been building this for longer than I have been alive. You have a name, Issei said. I have half a name, she said. A title more than a name. The people I worked with called them the archivist. Never a personal name. Always the archivist. Sable's shadow moved. Just slightly. I heard the same title, they said. As did I, said Mira. Issei wrote it on the board. The archivist. He looked at it for a long moment. Then we find out who that is, he said. The research took 3 days. It was not glamorous research. It was the kind that required cross-referencing 40 years of supernatural incident reports with historical archive records, reading correspondence in 4 languages, and following a chain of references so oblique that twice Issei lost the thread and had to rebuild from a different starting point. He did not do it alone. Lyriel, it turned out, had an extraordinary memory. Not photographic, she explained when he discovered this, but indexed. She experienced memory as a filing system rather than a continuous record, which meant she could retrieve any specific details she had ever encountered with the precision of a search function. Her family archive, which she had been carrying in a leather case since leaving home and which she had not fully explored since arriving in Co., turned out to contain several documents that referenced the archivist obliquely, in ways she had not recognized as significant before this context. Here, she said on the 2nd day, sliding a translated passage toward him. My great-grandmother's correspondence. She mentions an entity that matches, old, knowledgeable, interested in component collection, referred to in the forest court tradition as someone who reads the world by taking it apart. Takes the world apart, Issei repeated. Not to destroy it. To understand it. The distinction being important, Liriel said. The distinction being everything, he said. Someone who wants to understand something, even through destructive means, has a different logic than someone who wants to cause harm. And different logic means different vulnerabilities. She looked at him. You are not planning to fight them. Fighting is the last option, he said. The first option is always understanding them well enough to give them something better than what they are currently pursuing. Liriel was quiet for a moment. What if they will not accept something better? Then we revisit the fighting option. But I want to be certain we have actually tried the first one before we move to the last. She nodded slowly. Then she opened another file. There is more here, she said. I will keep reading. On the third day, Stella found the trajectory. She came into the ORC room at dawn with the particular focused intensity she carried when the stars had shown her something she had not expected, and she spread her newest chart across the table and pointed at a convergence point that was different from all the others. This one, she said, is very old. Not moving toward us. Stationary. Has been stationary for a long time. But it is, she paused, aware of us. The trajectory awareness runs in both directions. Which means whoever this is, they know we are looking. And they are not running, Tosca said. No. They are waiting. Where? Issei asked. Stella looked at the chart. Then she looked at him with her starlit eyes. The old library, she said. Not this school's library? The city archive. The one in the basement of the building on Shiroko Street that everyone thinks is just a record storage facility. Rias made a sound. I know that building. What is it? Aquino asked. It is, Rias said carefully, technically a neutral ground facility. One of the oldest in the city. Pre-treaty. Which means no faction has authority there. Which means, she paused, that whoever is there cannot be compelled to leave by any single faction. Neutral ground, Issei said. That is not a hiding place. That is a meeting place. He looked at the board. He looked at the chart. He thought about an entity that was 400 years old, that collected components for resonance constructs, that was still waiting in an archive building in the middle of a city that did not know it existed. They want to be found, he said quietly. By the right people. In the right way. The room was very still. Issei, Rias said. Yes. When you say you want to give them something better than what they are currently pursuing. Yes. What are you planning to offer them? He looked at the board for a long moment. At all the names and lines and fragments that had led here. The truth, he said. About what the construct would have actually done. And then, if they want it, something they have probably not been offered in 400 years. Which is? A conversation, he said, with someone who is actually listening. Chapter 20. 8 people walk into an archive. They went on a Saturday. Because Saturday had the quality of a day for important things and because Issei had learned to trust the feeling of the right moment. All 8 of them. This had been the subject of some discussion. Rias had proposed a smaller group, 2 or 3, on the grounds that a large number of people approaching a 400-year-old supernatural entity could be read as threatening. Issei had listened to this carefully, and then said, They have been alone for 400 years. I think the most honest thing we can bring is everyone. The debate had lasted approximately 4 minutes before Rias said all right and everyone started getting their coats. The building on Shiroko Street looked exactly like what it was officially, a low, gray, 3-story structure with the particular architectural language of municipal indifference, the kind of building that exists in every city and that nobody looks at twice. There was a sign that said City Records Archive, Division 3, which was the kind of sign designed to discourage the curious. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the building was something else entirely. The reception desk was empty but well maintained. Beyond it, a staircase led down, and the staircase had been built for something other than city records. The stone was old, older than the building around it, and it was worn in the center in the specific way that meant many thousands of feet over many hundreds of years. The light at the bottom was warm and amber, and came from fixtures that were not electric. They went down. The basement was a library. A real library, not the kind you found in schools or cities. The kind you found in stories, the ones that had been built when someone decided that books were worth building rooms specifically designed to honor them. The ceiling was high and vaulted, and the shelves went all the way up and were connected by narrow iron walkways. The smell was cedar and old leather and something else, something clean and old that Issei associated, he realized, with the ORC room, but more concentrated. At the center of the library, at a reading table covered in open books and annotated charts and neat stacks of translated documents, sat a woman. She appeared to be perhaps 60, which meant nothing in this context. She had white hair wound in an intricate arrangement, and eyes the color of old amber, and she was wearing clothes that were correct for the era they had been made in, which was not this one. She had a pen in one hand and she was looking at them over the rims of reading glasses with the expression of someone who had been expecting visitors and was reserving judgment on whether the visitors were worth the expectation. 8, she said. Her voice was accented with something that was not any current language. I expected fewer. This is everyone, Issei said. She looked at him specifically. She looked for a long time. Her amber eyes moved across his face with the methodical attention of someone reading a very complex text. You are the one who thought to come here, she said. Yes. And the one whose gear makes the particular resonance I have been tracking for 2 months. Also yes. She set down her pen. She took off her reading glasses. She folded her hands. Then sit down, she said. All of you. There are enough chairs. I have been planning this conversation for longer than I expected to plan it, and I would prefer to conduct it properly. Her name was Kailindra. She had been born in what was now the Czech Republic, approximately 430 years ago, to a family of human scholars who had, through a sequence of events she described with the brevity of someone who had told the story before and found it both important and exhausting, discovered that the line between scholarship and supernatural practice was more permeable than advertised. She had crossed that line at 22, through a process that had extended her life to an indeterminate degree and given her, as she put it, the particular curse of the long-lived, the ability to see how things were connected over time, and the corresponding inability to stop seeing it. 400 years is a long time to watch the same problems recur, she said. She was looking at her folded hands. The boundary was established with the best intentions. It has been maintained with varying degrees of competence. And it has consistently failed the people it was not primarily designed for, those being, Issei said, everyone in this room, more or less. The hybrids. The border cases. The beings who fall between classifications and are therefore claimed by none of the protections. Tosca was very still across the table. Lyriel had her hands folded in her lap with the quiet attention of someone hearing something said plainly for the first time that they have felt imprecisely for years. The construct, Issei said. The door. Was never intended to be a weapon, Kailindra said. I want you to understand that. It was intended to be a demonstration. A proof of concept. Proof that the boundary as designed was artificial and could be revised. But the calculations were wrong, Stella said. She said it without accusation? Simply. Kailindra looked at her. Yes. I discovered the error myself, 6 months ago. Which is approximately when your agent, she nodded at Karama, found it independently. A pause. I had been trying to determine how to halt the operation without losing the principle. The principle being, Issei said, that the people who fall between classifications deserve a better arrangement. Yes. Then you do not need the construct, he said. You need representation. The library was very quiet. Amber light. Old paper. 8 people and a woman 400 years old, and the slow understanding that the shape of the problem had just changed. Representation, Kailindra said, in the faction structures. A formal mechanism for border cases and hybrids and the beings who fall outside current classifications to have standing in the agreements that affect them. Not a door that tears down the boundary. A seat at the table where the boundary is managed. She looked at him for a very long time. You are 16, she said. Yes. And you are proposing a restructuring of supernatural political architecture that has not been successfully challenged in 3 centuries. I am proposing the beginning of one, he said. Beginnings are different from completions. Beginnings just need to be started. Kailindra unfolded her hands. She looked at the table. She looked at the 8 people sitting across from her, each of them strange and real and carrying the specific weight of a life that did not fit neatly into existing categories. You would need, she said slowly, someone with 400 years of documentation on every faction negotiation that has ever been attempted. Someone who knows where the leverage points are and where the pressure can be applied. We would, Issei agreed. She looked at him. Something in her amber eyes shifted, the long-held calculation of someone finally running a different equation. The operation, she said, is officially terminated. A breath released itself around the table. And you, she said to Issei, are either going to get this done or teach me something I have not learned in 4 centuries. A pause. I find both prospects equally interesting. Chapter 21. What the Archivist Keeps. Kailindra's library was larger than it appeared. This was not unusual in places that had been accumulating things for 4 centuries, but the degree to which it was larger was notable. The visible floor was simply the current working surface. Behind it, through a door that looked like a section of bookshelf until it opened, were 3 more rooms, each organized by a system that Kailindra described as intuitive and that Lyriel described, upon entering, as the most sophisticated archive structure she had ever encountered. My family's archive uses a lineage indexing system, Lyriel said, turning slowly in the doorway of the second room. This is using something else. Something that tracks, she paused, relationships between events rather than chronology. I call it a resonance index, Kailindra said. Every document is filed according to what it is connected to, not when it occurred. The assumption being that time is less useful as an organizational principle than connection. That is, Lyriel stopped. That is exactly how I experience memory. Kailindra looked at her with the attention she brought to things she found genuinely interesting. Is it? Yes. I have always found chronological systems slightly incorrect. Like they are describing the shape of a thing but not the thing itself. Exactly, Kailindra said, with the satisfaction of someone who had been saying this for a long time without a sympathetic audience. She looked at Lyriel with the expression of someone updating a category. You will be useful in here. I would like to be, Lyriel said, and meant it with the particular sincerity of someone who had just found something they did not know they were looking for. Issei spent most of that first Saturday working through the faction negotiation records. They were meticulous. 400 years of observation, cross-referenced and indexed in Kailindra's system, covering every significant agreement, every failed attempt, every faction power shift that had affected the boundary structure. The picture that emerged was not encouraging in its specifics but was encouraging in one particular way. The boundary has been revised before, he said, near the end of the afternoon. He was at a reading table in the third room, surrounded by documents, and Kailindra was across from him with her own stack. 3 times, she confirmed. In 600 years. Each revision added provisions. Extended protections. The structure is not immutable. It just requires the faction representatives to agree, which they are reluctant to do because the status quo benefits the dominant factions and change is always costly. Yes. So the question is not whether it can be changed. It is whether we can construct an argument compelling enough that the dominant factions see benefit in changing it. He looked at the documents. What did the previous revisions have in common? Kailindra was quiet for a moment. Each one followed a significant incident that made the cost of not revising higher than the cost of revising. A crisis argument, he said. Change motivated by disaster. It is the most historically reliable mechanism. It is also the one with the highest collateral cost, he said. We used a crisis to get here, but the crisis was contained. I want to see if the argument can be made without requiring a new one. Kailindra studied him. She did this often, with the focused attention of someone conducting continuous research. You have a different mechanism in mind, she said. I think so. The previous revisions were driven by crisis because that was the only time the factions were motivated to negotiate. But motivation is not the only path to negotiation. You can also create incentive. What incentive could persuade a dominant faction to extend protections to groups they currently benefit from ignoring? He looked at his notes. I am working on that, he said honestly. I do not have the answer yet. Good, she said. He looked up. If you had the answer already, she said, I would be less interested. The fact that you are sitting with an open question and not pretending to have closed it is, she paused, The first thing I have found genuinely hopeful in a long time. Rias found him near the end of the afternoon, in the first room, reading something that made him sit very still. What is it? She said, sitting across from him. Records of every rating game match in the last 2 centuries that involved a Devil Lord with hybrid bloodline claims in their peerage. He set the document down. The pattern is consistent. Hybrid bloodlines in a peerage are almost always listed as tactical advantages rather than as members in the full sense. The records use different language for them. Different categories. Rias was very still. I know, she said quietly. He looked at her. You have been thinking about this. Since before I met you. She looked at the document. I did not know how to address it. The system is very old and I am, she paused, part of the system. You are also the part of the system that has been building something different in a converted classroom in a school building for the past several weeks. She looked at him. You are not the system, he said. You are someone inside the system who has been figuring out what she actually believes. Those are different things. Rias was quiet for a long moment. The amber light of the archive made her hair look like deep autumn. When the time comes, she said, to make the argument to the factions. I want to be part of it. I was counting on it, he said. Something in her expression settled. Not relief, exactly. More like the feeling of a decision made and accepted. She reached across the table and moved the top document in his stack to the side so she could see the one beneath it, and they read together in the warm quiet, and it was the most natural thing in the world. Chapter 22. The things we carry and the people who help us set them down. November arrived, and with it the first real cold of the year. The ORC room acquired, by general agreement and without anyone formally proposing it, a second electric heater, a larger tea supply, and the particular quality of warmth that had nothing to do with either of those things. The warmth of a space that had been used for important purposes and remembered it. Issei thought about this one evening while everyone was working on their respective contributions to the investigation. Tosca was translating a document from a language that appeared to be older than the writing system currently used to record it. Stella was navigating by feel through a section of the star charts that described something she said was technically in the past but was, due to the nature of celestial time, also currently relevant. Lyriel was in the archive 3 days a week now, working with Kailindra on the resonance index with the focused delight of someone who had found their precise function in a system. Mira was attending the Eastern Chimeric Academy remotely, sitting in the corner with a tablet and a look of intense concentration that was occasionally broken by the expression of someone receiving information they had wanted their whole life. Karama was writing a detailed account of the entire operation, from her recruitment to the present, which Kailindra wanted for the archive and which Karama said was also, frankly, for herself, because writing it down made it real in a different way than just knowing it. Sable was sitting in the shadow under the window with a book, which was what they did most evenings, and the shadow under the window had begun to look, to Issei's particular perception, like a place where someone lived rather than a place where someone hid. Rias was at the desk, reading the faction correspondence Kailindra had given her, with a pen in her hand and the expression she wore when she was doing something that required the best version of herself. Aquino brought tea. She set Issei's cup beside him, and then stood for a moment, which was unusual. She usually moved with the efficiency of someone who had decided on each action in advance. Standing in place without a clear next step was not her habit. Are you all right? He asked. Yes. A pause. I wanted to say something. Then say it. She looked at the room. At all of them, the particular individual strangeness of each person in it. When I came to Rias's peerage, she said quietly, I was not all right. In ways I will not describe in detail now because there are people in this room I have not explained myself to and I choose to do that separately. But I was not all right, and Rias was patient, and over time I became something more like myself. She looked at Issei. What you have done here is the same thing but faster. And with more tales. And one person in the room who exists in a different layer of space than the rest of us. All points of accuracy, Sable said, from the shadow. Thank you, Issei said. I am not finished. She sat in the chair beside him. I want you to know that I see what it costs you. The noticing. The researching. The sitting with people in the middle of their difficult moments. You do it like it is easy because you are determined to make it look easy. But I am observant in my own way and I know it is not free. He was quiet for a moment. It is not free, he said. But the cost is worth it. I know. I want to know if you also let it be worth it for you. Or if you are only tracking the worth for other people. He considered this seriously. Aquino's questions deserved serious answers. I think, he said slowly, that I am still learning how to receive things. I am good at giving them. Receiving is harder. Yes, she said. I know that particular asymmetry very well. They sat together for a moment in the warmth of the room. We can work on that together, she said. If you like. I would like that, he said. She picked up her tea. She looked at the room. She smiled, and it was the smile he trusted most, simple and real, nothing performed, just a person who was genuinely happy in the specific way of someone who has come home. The next morning, Issei arrived at the school to find Tosca waiting on the bench outside the gate. This was unusual. Tosca was almost always inside the building by 7:30, in the chemistry lab, or the ORC room, or the small corner of the roof that she had made hers. Waiting at the gate implied waiting for someone. He sat down beside her. She did not say anything for a moment. Her wings were folded tight, which he had learned meant she was working something out internally, and her amber eyes were focused on the middle distance with the particular intensity of someone confronting something they had been avoiding. My family sent a letter, she said eventually. Good news or bad news? Complicated news. She looked at her hands. They have heard about the operation. The archivist, the collector, what happened here? The dragon bloodline community is small. News moves. She paused. They want me to come home. What do you want? She was quiet for a long time. A crow landed on the gate post, and regarded them both with the particular crow philosophy of patient observation. I want, she said, to stay. She looked at him directly, which she did when she was saying something she had decided to say, and was not softening. Here. This group. What we are building. I want to be part of it. Then tell them that, he said. They will not be pleased. I know. But they will understand that you have found something worth staying for. Even if they are not pleased about it, they will understand it. She looked at him for a moment. How do you know that? Because they raised someone who knows what worth staying for looks like. Her jaw shifted in that way it did. The near smile. Then, slowly, it completed itself. Full and real and warm, and it transformed her face in a way that made the morning feel brighter. He had seen her almost smile many times. The full version was new. He committed it carefully to memory, in the file that was getting very full. I will write to them today, she said. Good. They went inside together, and the crow on the gate post watched them go with the expression of a bird that knew something. Chapter 23. Rias Gremery and the letter she did not send. Rias wrote and rewrote the letter 4 times before Issei found her at midnight in the ORC room with the 4 drafts spread across the desk and the expression of someone who had been having an argument with themselves for several hours. He had come back for a book. He stayed. Who is it to? He asked, setting the book down and sitting across from her. My brother. She looked at the drafts. Xerxes. He is the Lucifer. One of the 4 devil kings. A pause. He is also my brother, who will read whatever I write with the attention of someone who has been waiting for me to ask him for something. What are you asking him for? I am not asking him for anything. I am informing him about what we are building and inviting him to consider whether the faction structures should begin formal discussions about representation for unclassified beings. Issei picked up one of the drafts. He read it. He set it down. He picked up another. What is wrong with them? He asked. They are all either too formal or too personal. Too formal, and he will read it as a political overture and respond through official channels, which will take months. Too personal, and he will read it as his little sister asking for a favor and come down to code to sort things out himself, which is, she paused, not what we need. What you need, Issei said, is for him to take it seriously as an idea and also to understand that you are serious as the person proposing it. Yes. Exactly. May I? She looked at him for a moment. Then she pushed the blank paper toward him. He wrote for about 8 minutes. He did not cross anything out. He set the pen down and slid it across to her. She read it. She read it again. How, she said? The first draft was too formal because you were writing to the Lucifer. The second was too personal because you were writing to your brother. The letter needs to be to both at the same time, which means it has to acknowledge that the two of them coexist in the same person without addressing either one directly. He looked at the paper. It addresses the idea. The idea is something both the Lucifer and the brother can engage with. The personal and the political meet at the idea rather than at the relationship. Rias was very still. You could have just told me that, she said. You had been working on it for hours. Sometimes it is easier to see the solution after you have tried all the other paths. You could still have just told me. I could have. But I thought writing it might be more useful. She looked at him. He looked back. The midnight quiet of the ORC room was the particular quiet of a space where important things happened, and the walls knew it. I am going to make a confession, she said. All right. When I first brought you here, I was interested in your gear. I knew it was significant. I knew it could be useful. I was thinking about it in the way I was trained to think about things, strategically. In terms of what it could contribute. She looked at her hands. I was wrong to do that. Not because the gear is not significant. But because that was the wrong way to think about you. He was quiet. You are not, she said carefully, a component. You are not a strategic asset. You are, she stopped. Found the words. You are the person who writes the letter I could not write. Who knows what Tosca needs before she says it. Who went to the library for Liriel and sat on the steps for Karama and made tea for Sable. You are, she stopped again. Rias, he said. Yes. I know what you mean. She looked at him. Do you? Yes. And I want you to know that the same thing I was describing in that letter, the idea that everyone deserves a seat at the table, applies to you too. You have been carrying the weight of this family name, and this political role and this responsibility since before you were old enough to choose it. And you deserve someone who sees you past all of that. She was very still. Her eyes were bright in the dim light. Do you see me past all of that? She asked. Very quietly. I have been seeing you past all of that, he said, since the library. You just did not notice. The ORC room was quiet and warm. The amber desk lamp was the only light. Outside, Kul was dark and still, and the stars were very clear. Rias reached across the table and picked up the letter. She read it one more time. Then she folded it carefully, and her hands were steady, and she was smiling, the real smile, the one she had laughed out on the day Drake made the joke, unguarded and entirely herself. Thank you, she said. Any time, he said. They sat together in the quiet until the lamplight felt warm enough to last all winter. Chapter 24. Karama and the Weight of Being Known. Karama wrote her account of the operation in 10 days. It was 112 pages, which was longer than anyone had anticipated, though perhaps they should have, given that she was describing 6 months of undercover work in a faction operation run by a 400-year-old archivist with a theory about supernatural boundary revision. There was a lot of ground to cover. She did not show it to anyone while she was writing it. The door of the small study room the school had assigned her for independent study was always closed when she was working, and she came out looking, every evening, slightly lighter than she had gone in. On the 10th day she brought it to the ORC room and set it on the table. Kailindra gets the archive copy, she said. This one is for the group. If you want it. Everyone looked at the document. It was printed and bound, which Karama had done at the school's print station at what had apparently been 5 in the morning, because she had wanted it to look like something real. I want it, Issei said. So do I, said Liriel. Karama sat down. Her 9 tales, which she kept visible in the ORC room as a matter of deliberate practice, something she had started doing a month ago, and which had cost her something the first day and less every day since, settled around her chair. I have also, she said, slightly carefully, included some things that are not about the operation. Personal history. Context. Things that explain why I was recruitable, and what that says about, she paused. About what I was carrying when I started. And what I put down while I was in this room. You put things down? Aquino asked gently. I have been putting them down since I got here. Karama looked at the document. I did not name it that at first. I thought I was just writing the facts. But somewhere in the middle I started writing the feelings and I decided not to take them out. Because the feelings were also facts. Issei was quiet for a moment. Then, that was brave. It was not brave, she said. It was, she searched, necessary. I have been good at hiding. I have been hiding for so long that I had stopped noticing I was doing it. And then I came here and you, she looked at him directly, did not give me anything to hide from. Which made the hiding feel, a pause, pointless. And exhausting. Good, he said. She laughed. It was the real laugh, the one that appeared when something surprised it out of her. That is your response? Good? It is the most accurate response. You are entirely strange. Consistently? She shook her head. Her tails were doing the thing they did when she was happy, moving slowly in a warm current that had nothing to do with any wind in the room. Issei, she said. Yes. Thank you. For the steps. For the tea. For the of course. Always, he said. He meant it in the largest sense of the word, and from the way her expression changed, she knew that. The document became the group's most read text. Not because everyone read it cover to cover, though some did. But because it said things, plainly and with the particular honesty of someone who had decided not to manage the reader's response, that needed to be said and had not yet been said in words. Sable read it in one night, sitting in their corner with their shadow pulled in tight, and in the morning they were slightly different, less still, less careful, the way a person changed when they had read something that named their experience, and realized they were not the only one. Mira read it in pieces between her academy sessions, and at the end of each piece she sent Kurama a message, brief and precise, which Kurama read and replied to, and the replies were also brief and precise, and it was the beginning of a friendship between two people who communicated mainly in the acknowledgement of difficult things. Tosca read it once. She did not comment. But the day after she finished it, she sat next to Kurama at lunch without any apparent reason, and Kurama moved her tray slightly to make room, and neither of them acknowledged this either, which was how they both preferred to handle things that mattered. Rias read it in her room, alone, and was quiet for most of the day afterward, and when she came to the ORC room that evening she told Kurama that the document was going to be part of the formal presentation to the faction representatives, attributed and with permission, because it was the most accurate account of what the current system failed to address that she had ever encountered. Kurama said yes. You can use it. Then she added very quietly, I hope someone would want to. Chapter 25. The letter arrives back. Sirs Excremi, the Lucifer, replied to his sister's letter 11 days after she sent it. The reply arrived in the ORC room via a sealed envelope that materialized on the desk at precisely 8 in the morning, which was the kind of delivery that did not involve postal services. Rias picked it up, looked at the seal for a moment, and opened it. She read it standing. Then she sat down. Then she read it again. Well? Aquino said. Rias set the letter on the desk. He wants a meeting, she said. Here. In Ko. Within the month. A meeting with you? Issei asked. A meeting with us. She looked up. He used the plural. He said, and I am paraphrasing, that the letter described a situation and a group of people that he would like to understand better before forming an opinion. A pause. He also said that the argument in the letter was the clearest articulation of the representation problem he had encountered, and that he has been thinking about this problem himself for longer than I knew. The room was quiet. He has been thinking about it, Kurama said slowly. Apparently. He was waiting for someone to frame it as a solvable political problem rather than a moral argument, because moral arguments, in the faction structure, can be dismissed as subjective. Rias looked at Issei. A solvable political problem cannot be dismissed as easily. The incentive, Issei said? Yes. He says in the letter that if we can demonstrate a mechanism by which extending protections to unclassified beings reduces friction in the faction system generally, he is prepared to bring it to the other kings. Can we demonstrate that? Mira asked. We can, Issei said. He was already at the board. We have 4 months of case studies in this room. We have Kalindra's 4 centuries of faction incident records. We have Sable's direct knowledge of how the unclassified beings are used instrumentally during those incidents. We have, he looked at the group, Everything we need to make this argument. In a month, Tosca said. In a month, he agreed. She looked at the board. Then at him. Then she picked up her chair and set it down in front of the board in the position that meant, I am working now. One by one, the others did the same. Kailindra came to the school for the first time that week. She walked through the gate on a Tuesday morning looking entirely like an eccentric visiting scholar, which was arguably accurate, and she was given a guest pass by the front office with the efficiency that suggested Rias had arranged this in advance. She came to the ORC room, sat down, and looked at the board, which by this point covered 2 walls and had been organized into an argument structure that Issei had been refining for 4 days. She studied it for a long time. This is not a political argument, she said finally. What is it? Issei asked. It is a systems argument. You are not arguing that it is right to extend protections. You are arguing that the system is more stable and less resource-intensive with the protections than without them. Yes. That is, she paused, considerably smarter than what I have been attempting for 400 years. You were attempting a moral argument, he said. Moral arguments require the listener to change what they value. Systems arguments only require the listener to update what they believe is true. The second is much less threatening. She looked at him with her amber eyes and her 4 centuries of observation. I have been doing this wrong, she said. Quietly. Not with bitterness. With the genuine honesty of someone absorbing new information. You were doing it with the best approach you had, he said. Now there is a better one. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the leather bag she had brought and produced a document he recognized. The original Prague incident report, the one that had been referenced in everything else but never directly obtained. For the presentation, she said. It demonstrates the only previous attempt at the kind of large-scale construct intervention we are arguing against. Having the primary source strengthens the system's case. He looked at the document. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. I have been waiting 400 years to be useful in a way that did not involve building something catastrophic, she said. It was dry, and it was honest, and it was the most human thing he had heard her say. The least I can do is bring you a document. Chapter 26. Late November. Preparation and the spaces between it. November deepened and the days grew short, and the ORC room became a place where the lights were always on. The work was real work, reading, arguing, drafting, revising. Kailindra came 3 times a week and sat across from Liriel in the archive on Shiroko Street on the others, and the resonance index grew to include everything they had compiled since the operation began. The presentation took shape slowly and then quickly, the way things did when the foundation was strong enough to build on. In the evenings, after the formal work was done, the room became something else. It was Stella who started it, as she started most things, by doing the thing naturally and waiting for others to join. She had begun reading aloud from a book she found in Kailindra's archive, a text of celestial mythology from a tradition that no longer existed in any official record but was, she said, the most accurate description of the actual behavior of stars she had encountered. It was also, incidentally, quite beautiful. The first evening she read from it, only Issei was still in the room. He listened. He asked one question about the cosmological model it described. She answered it. They sat for another hour. The second evening, Sable stayed. The third evening, everyone stayed. By the 4th week, the evening reading was simply part of what they did. Different people read on different evenings. The texts varied. Kailindra's archive, Liriel's family documents, a novel that Mira had brought from the Eastern Academy that turned out to be about a sea chimera who wanted to be an architect, which produced the specific warmth of recognition in Myra's expression on every page. One evening Tosca read. She had not been a reader in company before. She held the book at an angle that suggested she was not entirely comfortable being watched while she did it, and her voice was low and precise, and the text she chose was a Dragon Court history that she had had since she was 8, and had read so many times the binding was soft. The passages she chose were about what the court records called the dignity of the ordinary life, the long stretches of time between significant events when a dragon simply existed and that existing was enough. When she finished she closed the book and looked at the table. My mother gave me this, she said. Not to anyone. Just said it. It is beautiful, Liriel said. Yes, Tosca said. She did not look up. But her wings, which she had been keeping folded for weeks because the cold made extension uncomfortable, spread slightly. Not all the way. Just enough to breathe. Issei read one evening too. He chose something unexpected, the chemistry notes from the first week of school. His own notes, from before any of this had started, with the small dragon drawn in the margin of the history section. He read them straight, as though they were a text. The periodic table recitation he had memorized in 3 days. The titration procedure. The margin notes where he had been working out something unrelated to chemistry. Everyone was quiet the way you were quiet when something was unexpectedly moving. The dragon in the margin, Kurama said. You drew it before you had any reason to. I have always drawn dragons, he said. I did not know why. I thought it was just a habit. Because I was there, Drake said. The gear was dormant but not absent. The draw toward dragons was me making myself known in the only way available. The room absorbed this. You were drawing him home, Stella said. She said it simply, as a statement of navigational fact. Yes, Drake said in a voice that was quieter than his usual register. That is one way to describe it. Issei looked at the margin dragon. Small and pleased and simple. I am glad you found me, he said, to the gauntlet. A warm pulse. I as well, Drake said. More than I expected to be. Chapter 27. Sona Citri and the conversation that was overdue. Sona Citri arrived at the ORC room on a Wednesday afternoon with a folder under her arm and the expression of someone who had been waiting for an appropriate moment for several weeks and had decided the appropriate moment was now. She knocked. She was the first person to knock. Issei opened the door. Hayadu, she said. Citra-senpai, he said. I would like to speak with the group. A pause. If that is acceptable. He stepped aside. She came in and took the measure of the room with the efficiency that was her primary characteristic, fast, precise, thorough. Her gaze moved from person to person and rested on each one for exactly as long as it needed to and no longer. She sat in the offered chair and opened her folder. I am going to tell you what I know, she said. Which is more than you might expect, because I have been aware of the supernatural situation in Ko since I arrived, and I have been watching what your group has been doing with increasing interest since October. You are not surprised by any of this, Rias said. No. I am the Citri heir. The situation you are in is not entirely different from the one I navigate. She looked at her folder. I have also been thinking about the representation problem for some time. Independently. And I believe the argument you are building has a gap. The room sharpened. What gap? Issei asked. The system's argument is strong. I agree with the approach. But the faction structure requires consensus from all 4 kings, and you have a path to the Lucifer. You do not yet have a path to the other 3. She looked at him directly. 2 of the remaining kings are currently positioned against any boundary revision because they have interpreted previous proposals as power reduction moves. You need to reframe the proposal so that it reads as power consolidation, not power reduction. Issei looked at the board. He looked at her. You have been working on this. I told you. I have been watching with increasing interest. She closed the folder. I want to help. My family has relationships with 2 of the 3 remaining kings that Gremory does not have. I can open doors that would otherwise stay closed. Why? Rias asked. Not hostile. Genuinely asking. Sona looked at her. Something passed between them, the specific communication of 2 people who understood each other's world very well and had not, until this moment, said so directly. Because the system as it stands is wrong, Sona said simply. And I have been waiting for someone to start changing it in a way that might actually work. She looked at Issei. You started something. I would like to help finish it. Then you are welcome, Issei said. Same as everyone else. She looked around the room again. Her expression remained precise and composed, but there was something underneath it, something that Issei's particular perception classified, after a moment, as longing. The specific longing of someone who had been doing important things alone for a long time. Thank you, she said. Kaneko moved silently to the cabinet above the chess set and produced the cup and the tea. She said both in front of Sona with the same matter-of-fact care she brought to everything. Sona looked at the cup. She looked at Kaneko. White tea, Kaneko said. I notice you drink it when you work late in the student council room. A pause. You noticed. I noticed things, Kaneko said. Issei is not the only one. Sona picked up the cup and the precision in her face softened, fractionally, into something that was genuinely touched. No, she said. I see that. Chapter 28. The night before. The meeting with Sirs Cremery was scheduled for the last Saturday of November. The evening before, the ORC room was quieter than usual. Not empty. Everyone was there, all 10 of them now, Sona having joined the working group 3 weeks ago with the efficiency of someone who wasted nothing and the particular relief of someone who had been wanting to join for longer than that. But quiet in the way that spaces became quiet when something significant was 24 hours away and everyone knew it. They had done the work. The presentation was ready. The argument was as strong as 10 people and 400 years of documentation could make it. The paths to each of the 4 kings had been mapped and prepared. There was nothing more to do tonight, which meant everyone was simply there. Stella had fallen asleep on the floor again, which happened on high concentration days, and her starlit eyes were closed and the light in them moved slowly even in sleep, tracking something in the celestial rotation that the rest of them could not see. Kaneko had put the blanket over her with the same wordless care she always did. Sable was in their shadow, reading, and their shadow had begun to look comfortable, which was a thing Issei had not known shadows could look. Mira had 4 arms and was using 2 of them to hold a book and the other 2 to braid Lyriel's hair, which had started as a practical arrangement because Lyriel's hair was long enough to be inconvenient and Myra's extra hands were, as she put it, a resource. It had become something else over several evenings, comfortable, habitual, the kind of physical ease that developed between people who had decided they trusted each other. Lyriel was reading and occasionally making sounds of scholarly interest, and occasionally saying things to Mira that made Mira laugh, and the laugh was bright and startled and real in exactly the same way every time. Karama was writing in a small notebook, which she did in the evenings, adding to the account she had started with the archived document. She had told Issei once, when he asked, that she thought she might keep writing for a long time. That there was more to put down than she had originally realized. Tosca was doing something he had not seen before. She was sketching. On a large piece of paper, in precise, confident lines, she was drawing the room. Not as a technical exercise. As a record. He watched her for a while. You are drawing us, he said. Yes. Can I see? She showed him. The drawing was extraordinary. Each person rendered with the precise attention of someone who had been looking carefully for weeks, all the specific details that made each of them themselves. Stella's slow-moving eyes, visible as implied light. Sable's shadow, folded just right. Myra's 4 arms, arranged in the specific configuration of someone content. Lyriel's ears, fully extended for the first time, not pulled back in the unconscious protective posture she had arrived with. He was in the drawing too. At the board, his back to the viewer, the gauntlet visible on his left arm. She had drawn him slightly smaller than everyone else, which surprised him until he looked at it longer and understood. He was the reference point. The center around which the others were arranged, not because he was the largest but because the arrangement made sense when he was in it. He did not say that. He looked at the drawing for a long moment. This is very good, he said. I know, she said, without self-consciousness. Then, a beat later, I wanted to remember it. This version of things. Before tomorrow changes them. They will change for the better, he said. I know that too. She looked at the drawing. But the before is also worth keeping. He thought about that. He thought about all the things worth keeping. The crow on the gate post. The rain on the roof. Tea on the steps at 6 in the morning. The chemistry notes with the margin dragon. The specific quality of this room on this evening, all of them here, all of them changed from what they had been. Yes, he said. It is. Rias was the last one in the room when everyone else had gone home. Issei stayed because he had noticed she was staying, which was reason enough. She was standing at the window looking at the night, and she was holding the chess piece from the set on the side table, the White King, turning it in her fingers. Ready? He said. Yes, she said. I think so. A pause. My brother is not a simple person. He is kind and he is perceptive, and he is genuinely principled. But he is also the Lucifer, and the Lucifer carries the weight of every devil who has ever needed the faction structure to survive. You are worried he will say no. I am worried he will say not yet. She looked at the chess piece. Not yet is kinder than no. But it is also indefinite. Not yet can be moved, Issei said. No is a wall. Not yet is a door with a lock. Locks have keys. She looked at him. Do you always think in metaphors at midnight? Only the useful ones. She set the chess piece back on the board. She turned from the window. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, I want you to know something. All right. 3 months ago I was in this room alone, managing a situation that I had been managing alone for years, and it was, she paused, enough. I thought it was enough. I thought managing was what you did, and that it was sufficient. She looked at him. You walked through the hallway 3 months ago, and I thought I was recruiting an asset. And you turned out to be, she stopped. He waited. The most important person I have met, she said quietly. Not the most powerful. Not the most useful. The most important. In the sense of the thing that matters. He looked at her. She looked back. The night through the window was very still. I know, he said. Softly. It is the same for me. She took a breath. Let it out. And then she smiled, the unguarded one, the real one, the one that was entirely her. Good, she said. Good, he agreed. They turned the lights off together and walked out into the cold night, and the stars were very clear, and somewhere behind them the crow was quiet on the gate post, and the evening felt like a door on the edge of opening into something wide. Chapter 29. Surzex and What He Sees. Surzex Lucifer arrived at Ko Academy at 9 in the morning on the last Saturday of November. He arrived looking like a person rather than a faction leader, which was a deliberate choice that Rias recognized and that Issei noted. He wore civilian clothing, no emblems of office, no formal supernatural indicators. He was tall and red-haired, and he moved through the school grounds with the ease of someone who had been in many rooms and could read them quickly. He arrived with 2 people, his queen, Graphia, who had silver hair and the precise efficiency of someone who organized the world for a living, and a second advisor who was introduced simply as Tannen, a former dragon king who was now retired and who looked at Issei's gauntlet with the expression of someone encountering an old acquaintance. Tannen, Drake said, with an inflection that contained an entire history. Drake, Tannen said, looking at the gauntlet. It has been a while. Indeed. Does your host know what he has? He worked it out in the first week. Tannen looked at Issei. A long, slow assessment. Good, he said. With great simplicity and great weight. The meeting was held in the ORC room, which Surzex had specifically requested after Rias described it in the preparatory correspondence. He walked in, took the measure of the room the way his sister did, faster, and sat at the table they had arranged for the occasion. He looked at everyone in turn. When his gaze reached Issei, it stayed. You wrote the letter, he said. I helped Rias write it, Issei said. She told me. She said, and I remember this exactly. He found the frame that I had been looking for. He looked at Issei with eyes that were the same blue-green as Rias's, deep and direct. I want you to know that I have been holding that frame since I read it, and it has not broken under examination. I am glad, Issei said. Tell me about the system's argument. So Issei told him. He did not use notes. He had been carrying this argument for long enough that it had become part of his thinking, available when needed, structured and clear. He explained the current system's resource cost when unclassified beings were instrumentalized rather than protected. He explained the friction reduction model. When individuals had formal standing, conflicts that currently required faction intervention resolved at the individual level. He explained the stability argument. Factions that included rather than excluded had historically demonstrated lower internal conflict rates, which he documented with 4 centuries of Kalindra's records. Surzex listened without interrupting. Graphia took notes with a speed that suggested she was keeping a verbatim record. Tannen watched from the corner with his arms crossed and the expression of a retired dragon king who had seen many things and was updating his assessment. When Issei finished, the room was quiet. Surzex looked at his sister. You have been building this for 3 months, he said. We have, she said. This group. This group. He looked around the room again. He looked at Tosca, whose wings were folded but whose amber eyes were entirely steady. At Karama, whose 9 tails were visible and still. At Sable, in their corner, shadow folded with the precise care of someone who had decided to be present. At Mira, her 4 arms relaxed. At Lyriel, whose ears were fully extended with the unconscious ease of someone who had stopped apologizing for them. At Stella, who was looking at the ceiling with the look she wore when she was reading something the rest of them could not see. At Sona, who looked back at him with the composed expression of someone who had been waiting for this conversation since long before today. At Kaneko, who was simply herself, which was, in context, the most confident thing in the room. At Aquino, who met his eyes with her warm, complex smile and the stillness of someone who had learned not to hide. And at Issei. My sister's letter said something, Surzek said to Issei. It said, the most important person I have met is not the most powerful, but the most important in the sense of the thing that matters. I want to understand what that means in practice. Rias made a small sound. She had not known he was going to quote that. It means, Issei said, that the measure of something's value is not its force but its effect on the people around it. The people in this room are here because they found something that did not treat their existence as a problem to manage. That is not power. It is just, he paused, the basic courtesy of actually looking. Surzek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I am going to bring this argument to the other kings. Formally, as a proposal for faction review. I want 6 months for the political preparation. The room absorbed this. 6 months is not yet, Rias said quietly. No, her brother said. 6 months is a timeline. There is a difference. He looked at Issei. I will need your documentation. All of it. Properly formatted for faction submission. It will be ready in 2 weeks, Issei said. Good. Surzek stood. He did not extend his hand, which was a formal gesture. He looked at his sister. You have done something, he said, that I am going to need some time to fully understand. But I want you to know that I am, he paused, and the Lucifer expression shifted, fractionally, into the brother expression, very proud of you. Rias looked at him. Thank you, she said. Quietly. Like someone receiving something they had wanted without quite admitting it. He left with Grafia and Tannen, and the door of the ORC room closed, and the room was full of people looking at each other with the particular expression of those who have just watched something important shift. Drake was warm on Issei's arm. Well, Drake said. Yes, Issei said. Beginnings, Drake said. And the gauntlet glowed, warm and red and gold. Rias laughed. Then everyone laughed, all of them, in different voices and for different reasons and all at once, and the ORC room held the sound of it the way it held everything important, warmly, completely, and without reservation. Later, after everyone had gone, Issei stood at the window for a long time. He thought about the boy in the second row who drew dragons in his margins and listened to everything and felt, most of the time, like someone standing outside a room where important things were happening. He thought about October and the crow on the gate post and the question that had been building in his chest for weeks before he understood what it was. He thought about a fallen angel who had wanted to take something from him and had instead set something in motion. About a girl with scales who had answered a direction question. About a navigator who had been following his star for 3 years. About a 9-tailed kitsune sitting on school steps in the early morning, letting something down that she had been holding too long. He thought about Rias and what she had said about the most important thing not being the most powerful. He thought about Aquino and the asymmetry of giving and receiving. He thought about Tosca's drawing, the room preserved in precise lines, the before worth keeping. He thought about 6 months and a timeline and the difference between not yet and a door with a lock. He thought about his hands, one ordinary and one wearing the warmth of a heavenly dragon who had been waiting a very long time to be in the right arm. Drake, he said. Yes. Are you glad it is me? A pause. Long enough to be genuine. You are, Drake said, carefully and with absolute sincerity, the best thing that has happened to me in 1400 years. Issei looked at the window. At the co-evening, cold and clear, the first stars appearing at the edge of the dark. The same stars Stella read. The same dark that Sable moved through. The same city that contained an archive and a library and a school where important things were happening in a converted clubroom that smelled of cedar. He put his hand on the windowsill. Good, he said. Because we have a great deal more to do. The gauntlet glowed once, bright and warm. Outside, the crow called from the gate post, clear and deliberate, and the sound of it went out into the evening and the evening received it. And the life that had been waiting became, fully and without reservation, the life that was.